The white snowfield was often described as the heart of the world. Amidst the expansive snows lay a realm inhabited by fearsome creatures. Among these terrifying beings was a colossal white serpent, notorious for consuming entire glaciers. An enormous gray bear had the power to cause earthquakes, while a cursed rat spread corruption and pollution throughout the seas. Despite the terrifying nature of the place, an emperor who had once managed to escape from it spoke of it. In that place, it becomes clear that the monsters are not the most perilous threat lurking there. Amidst the vast expanse of the white snowfield, a man stood face to face with a fearsome creature resembling a scorpion. The character faced the adversary head-on, launching into a fierce battle. With swift and decisive strikes, they succeeded in eliminating the threat. Following the battle, a companion expressed disdain, pointing out that his actions perfectly the behavior of a barbarian, someone who wore their ignorance proudly, as if it were a mark of distinction. The young man with silver hair muttered complaints about the extended time he had been forced to endure with these idiots. In response, the girl, with a look of pure innocence, inquired about the definition of the word ignorance and whether it was something edible. This led him to release a heavy sigh, overcome by hopelessness, and instruct her to simply dismiss the thought. In a different scene, he reprimands them for consuming the food he had clearly forbidden, warning that doing so would lead to their demise. He was amazed at how they managed to consume everything in under a week. The girl and the bald man interpreted his words as commendation, viewing their actions as a noble challenge. Unexpectedly, the bald man known as became unwell. After a brief moment of tension, the character suddenly loses consciousness and falls to the ground. The girl, filled with urgency and panic, attempted to rouse him from his slumber, her voice rising in a desperate cry. In the midst of the turmoil, the hero reflected on how this scenario was far from what he had ever desired. The memories swirling in his mind transported him to a time when he yearned to escape into a fantastical realm brimming with enchantment and marvels. Driven by this dream, he made the bold decision to leave his job behind and set out on a grand adventure, ultimately scaling the tallest peak on the planet. The energy penetrated the heart of the planet and continued its journey to the farthest southern tip. Despite his nightly prayers, nothing ever changed. Each evening, he found himself hoping, with the stark understanding that reality was a far cry from the fantasies he yearned for, longing to awaken in the midst of a magical realm. One day, the answers to his prayers finally arrived. In a flashback to a time long ago, a man trembled uncontrollably as the harsh cold seeped into his bones. Nearby, his companion suggested that he should cover himself with more fur to avoid the peril of freezing. The men were revealed to be members of a mercenary group, under the command of a determined captain, charged with the daunting task of traversing the white snowfield. Among them, one voiced his discontent, expressing that the mission was akin to a death wish despite the allure of the reward, and deemed the notion of crossing the treacherous terrain as sheer insanity. The captain commanded the group to remain quiet. The group was reminded that they had all consented to the mission. One man responded, expressing that they hadn't anticipated the conditions would be so unforgiving and frigid. Within the cozy confines of a carriage, an older servant turned to a young lady named, who hailed from the house of Akasha, inquiring about her well-being. She assured him that she was doing well. Outside, the guards grumbled about the bone-chilling cold, which led the servant to silently curse them as insolent bastards. Stood up for the group, advising her servant to show leniency, since they were the sole individuals willing to protect them on their trek over the vast, white snowfield. Following the events, proposes to the group that they invite the guards indoors, noting the bitter coldness of the weather outside. The servant's request, reminding her of her awareness regarding the true nature of the creatures lurking within the white snowfield. Figured he was referring to the monsters. The servant started narrating a tale about an ancient emperor. This emperor harbored a desire to rule the entire world and aimed to conquer the vast white snowfield to fulfill his grand ambition. The emperor personally ventured into the snowfield, accompanied by his most formidable fighters and soldiers. Several years later, the emperor's empire crumbled into obscurity, forgotten by the annals of history. Stripped of his warriors and soldiers, he returned alone. The man appeared as if he had aged several decades, and his words carried the weight of someone who had lost his sanity, as he affirmed the presence of creatures lurking within the snowy expanse. He noted, however, that the true peril in that place was not a beast, but the savage inhabitants. He compared the place to a hellish realm where survival seemed impossible. The servant attempts to explain that it is merely a myth, remained firm in her belief, asserting that the emperor's words held significance, given that many of the creatures he mentioned were eventually found. The servant smiles, noting that, even with the tales told, not a single person has ever come forward claiming to have actually seen a barbarian. Acknowledged the truth in his statement. The mercenary captain abruptly commanded the group to stop, gesturing toward an unusual sight on the horizon. The figure remained indistinct against the distant horizon, obscured by the steadily falling snow. The captain shared a mix of news with the crew. On the bright side, the newcomer was small. However, the downside was its direct path toward them. The crowd was filled with astonishment and anticipation. As the mysterious form drew nearer, the observer recognized that it was a person. The true surprise hit them with full force when they identified him as a barbarian, instilling fear deep within the mercenaries' hearts. The barbarian drew near and began to address them, expressing his inability to endure the presence of the other barbarians, which prompted him to take a stroll. The man identified himself as hailing from the Akan tribe. He conveyed his astonishment at encountering strangers in the vast snowfield and regarded the meeting as a fortunate coincidence. Speculated that the group was likely a band of mercenaries tasked with safeguarding a merchant caravan. He proposed the idea that they might consider retreating, although he harbored doubts about their willingness to do so. He then inquires whether their employer is present in the nearby carriage. Following those events, he caught them off guard by flashing a smile and expressing his desire to be employed as well. The mercenaries stood in shock, their minds reeling as they tried to comprehend the implications of his words. Made his intentions clear as he explained his proposal. He intended to assist them in traversing the snow-covered landscape. The mercenaries eyed the legendary barbarian with suspicion, puzzled by his request for work. They questioned among themselves why someone of his renowned status would seek employment, pondering whether this indicated a lack of hostility on his part. Addressed their silent concerns, assuring them that if he had any ill intentions, none of them would still be alive. A mercenary with visible hesitation turned to his captain, seeking the leader's decision. Within the confines of the carriage, both the servant and listened intently to the conversation unfolding around them. The captain informed about the barbarian's request to be employed as a mercenary, and then sought her opinion on the matter. The servant, curious about the potential outcome of a fight, sought the opinion of the mercenary captain. The captain, however, firmly cautioned against engaging in such a conflict. Upon receiving the news, decides to proceed and instructs the captain to communicate their acceptance of the barbarian's proposal. The captain acknowledged his admiration for her choice and proceeded to relay their agreement to the barbarian. Felt a surge of joy upon receiving the wonderful news. Without warning, made a beeline for the carriage, leaving the captain both shocked and horrified. Reassures him, emphasizing that fear is unnecessary. The individuals present are merely employees, and it is essential for him to address his concerns directly with their employer. The captain issued a stern warning, indicating a readiness to take action if any suspicious behavior was attempted. Stood in quiet contemplation as one of the mercenaries nervously turned to the captain, questioning whether it was truly wise to allow him a meeting with her. One mercenary questioned why they, as guards, didn't attempt to halt his actions, while his companion dismissed the thought, finding the notion of stopping him utterly laughable. Within the confines of the room, the servant's anxiety grew as herself to leave. Despite his panic, she urged him to keep his composure. From outside the room, his voice reached ears, leaving her startled as he inquired about entering. Once she regains her composure, she allows him to come inside. Within the carriage, expressed to the servant his hope that the atmosphere had settled, reassuring him that there was no intention of causing them any harm. In that moment, realized with awe that the legendary barbarian was standing directly in front of her. Nervously, she offered her greeting to him, and with a composed demeanor, acknowledged her with a return greeting. Observed the cozy warmth inside the carriage, remarking on the challenge of achieving such a comfortable temperature amidst a snowy landscape. Pointed out that the warmth was a result of magic. Appeared content as though he had anticipated such an explanation in this world. Wasted no time, directly addressing the group with a stark warning about the perilous nature of their surroundings. He assessed the slim odds of survival under the current mercenaries and declared that he would assume responsibility for their safety. He mentioned there was one condition attached, prompting to inquire about his specific request. Discloses his condition, sharing insights from beyond the snowfield, focusing particularly on the information she holds. Wanted to understand what he was asking for, while confidently reassured her that she had nothing to lose. Understood that she had no alternative and consented to the situation. Felt a sense of satisfaction with her decision and inquired about her name. The young woman identified herself as hailing from the esteemed house of Akasha. In response, he introduced himself as conveying his delight at the prospect of collaborating with her. The story delves into his mind, revealing his yearning for a life filled with adventure and magic. This desire unexpectedly became his reality when he found himself transformed into a barbarian, standing in the midst of a vast, icy landscape, with no opportunity to grasp the reasons behind this sudden change. He recalled the relentless cold that enveloped the land, alongside the formidable beasts that roamed without end. He had been the leader of a tribe, constantly battling for survival amidst the harsh conditions, and he had faced everything with a sense of hopelessness. For many years, he tirelessly endeavored to escape the bleak and desolate snowfield. An unfamiliar force manifested itself as an unfinished task, obstructing his departure. He realized he could only leave once the task was completed. Just when he was on the brink of surrender, individuals from the outside world occasionally surfaced, leaving him puzzled as to why anyone would choose to enter such a dreadful place willingly. Came to the understanding that beyond the desolate snowfield lay a realm filled with the wonders and enchantment he had yearned for throughout his life. From that point forward, he dedicated himself to his tasks with great effort, driven by the desire not only to survive, but also to achieve his ultimate aim of escaping. He recalled the times he defeated creatures and accomplished each mission set before him, fueled by the unwavering belief that escape was within his reach. Due to his inability to depart from this location, the knowledge he acquires from those visiting from the outside holds immense value for him. Most of the humans he had encountered up to this point either reacted with panic, attempting to confront him, or succumbed to madness. He pondered over the significant amount of time that had elapsed since he last engaged in a conversation with a civilized individual. Speaking with felt like a balm for his mind, providing relief after being in the company of uncultured brutes. In the present, concluded that their cargo contained weapons. Taken aback, questioned his ability to discern that fact. He pointed out that the clatter of sharp weapons coming from the carriages was unmistakable. Then, with curiosity, he inquired if there was a war unfolding beyond their immediate surroundings. Acknowledged that hostilities were ongoing between the Empire and the Kingdom, while observed that the wider world was also far from peaceful. Noted that the mighty Empire was advancing with overwhelming forces, yet the Kingdom stood firm, refusing to surrender without a fight. The Heroes were diligently safeguarding the borders. Found his interest stirred by the terms, prompting him to inquire about the nature of the power they employed. Inquired whether he was unfamiliar with mysticism, to which he responded that he had never ventured beyond this place. Confessed that she was not entirely sure about the specifics either, yet she started to elaborate on the topic. The girl explains that there exists a power in the world known as mysticism, which only a rare few have the ability to sense or wield. Individuals in this world are assigned power ranks. Those in the third rank possess the ability to merely sense the presence of mysticism. The individuals in the second rank possess the ability to truly harness this power. The elite tier consisted of individuals capable of channeling their power through mana or aura, a skill commonly found among knights, mages, and those who wield elements. She conveys that at a certain point, titles lose their significance, as those who possess them are entities that defy human understanding. She illustrates the concept of the transcendent rank, individuals who wield and manipulate mystical forces at will, possessing the power to divide the skies and the land. He is among those who hold this exalted status. In the end, there stood the hero, depicted as a legendary figure whose powers transcended mere control of mystical forces to shape the very fabric of the world. Wrapped up her explanation by emphasizing that even someone ranked third, is seen as a formidable figure in a smaller area. Upon absorbing all the information, expressed his desire to meet them, which left feeling utterly perplexed. Pondered, realizing that he had lost track of how long he had been confined in this place. His days were consumed by a relentless struggle for survival. He finds himself trapped in a vast snowfield, surrounded by the mysterious beauty of a fantasy world, with no means of escape. Caught in the vast expanse of the snowfield, he yearned with all his might to escape its icy grip. Insistently, he corrected himself, emphasizing the necessity of leaving immediately. Continued her conversation, inquiring if was indeed the legendary Barbarian. Responded ambiguously, suggesting it was possible, and observed from his expression that she recognized him. Was taken aback to learn that there was indeed a legend surrounding him, as she confirmed. Chuckled to himself, as the realization dawned upon him that the eccentric individual he had encountered earlier was likely the very emperor from the ancient legend. He then reassures, suggesting that her legend might indeed hold truth, since someone fitting that description had visited this place many years earlier. Shifted the conversation, pondering the reason behind transporting such a vast number of weapons across this especially perilous snowfield. When inquired about the purpose behind her travels, explained that they required a substantial amount of money. She elaborates on how her family, long established in the trading business for many generations, has found themselves burdened with huge debts as a result of the cunning plots orchestrated by jealous competitors. The journey's purpose was to avert the downfall of their family. Astutely figures out that her strategy to clear the debts involves selling weapons to the kingdom engaged in a conflict with the empire. This insight catches off guard, impressed by his perceptiveness. Elaborated on his thought process, pointing out that she had earlier noted how the empire launched attacks with overwhelming forces. This indicated that the empire was not short on weapons, implying that it was the kingdom that desperately required them. Consequently, he reasoned, when there was a scarcity of supply against high demand, prices inevitably soared. He realized that even though he was unaware of the worth of items beyond his current surroundings, the potential gain justified the danger of traversing the snowfield. The character realized that choosing such a perilous path implied there were no safer alternatives to reach the kingdom, indicating that their land likely bordered the empire's. Nodded in agreement, affirming the accuracy of his conclusion. Stood in shock, grappling with the unexpected cleverness displayed before her. It seemed unbelievable, considering she had always heard tales painting the legendary Barbarian as nothing more than a brutish fool. Confusion swirled within her as she pondered over who he truly was. Without warning, the carriage began to tremble fiercely, causing the servant to exclaim in shock. Calmly reveals that unexpected visitors have arrived. A massive, distorted creature emerged in front of the group of mercenaries. They realized that it was a dark, viscous substance. Inquired whether that was indeed the creature's name. Affirmed this, noting that it was a monster documented in the archives. Over the years, numerous formidable adventurers had dared to traverse the snowfield. Though only a handful survived to tell their tales, they documented the creatures they met. Among these creatures, the black slime was frequently mentioned in their records. She then wondered aloud if was familiar with it as well. Casually responded, acknowledging his awareness of the subject. He likened them to rubbery items that were acceptable as a snack and considered them a satisfactory meal. Was horrified, unable to comprehend the situation, and stared at him in disbelief, questioning whether he actually consumed them. He inquired if she was interested in trying one and proposed they search for some, but she quickly declined, her voice tinged with panic. A menacing black slime itself to launch an attack. Everyone turned their eyes toward, seeking assistance. Explained that he had an agreement with them to safeguard their lives, asserting that his intervention would only occur in the event of genuine peril. He conveyed to them that they were capable of managing the situation on their own. Additionally, he expressed the necessity of evaluating the power level of the outside world personally. The creature launched its assault on the group of mercenaries. The captain commanded his men to lift their shields. The mercenaries found themselves grappling with the forceful onslaught of the monstrous creature. One of the individuals leaped forward, attempting to deliver a final blow to the creature. He found himself hurled aside as if he were nothing more than a bug, and he muttered angrily about the creature's overwhelming power. The captain suddenly recalled a crucial piece of information and urgently communicated the attack strategy. He clarified that the black slime was only capable of moving in straight lines. With this insight, he instructed his men to spread out and synchronize their assault. The moment the order was given, his men quickly acknowledged it, indicating their comprehension of the revised strategy. The mercenaries followed the captain's plan with precision, skillfully evading the black slime's assaults while striking back in perfect unison. The creature let out a howl of agony, overwhelmed by the force of their synchronized onslaught. The assault persisted with unyielding intensity, as each thrust was delivered with unwavering determination. The captain strongly encourages them to continue their assault relentlessly, without any pauses. Upon discovering that conventional attacks proved futile, the captain instructed his men to focus their efforts on striking the nucleus concealed within the monster. The captain, wielding his radiant sword, strikes with immense force, slicing through the body of the slime with a downward motion. The red core of the monster disintegrated, causing its body to start dissolving. The mercenaries, breathless from exertion, reveled in their triumph. They could hardly believe their own success in conquering the challenge. Their moment of triumph is abruptly cut short when another creature, a colossal white wolf, emerges unexpectedly. The mercenaries quickly responded to the emerging threats, with one of them urgently instructing the others to target the neck. One member of the group suddenly leaped forward, landing directly on the wolf. Following the battle, a mercenary remarked with a hint of arrogance that the white snowfield seemed far less perilous than its reputation suggested, speculating that the tales about it were likely blown out of proportion. The captain cautioned him against becoming too self-satisfied, reminding the group that their journey was far from over, as they hadn't yet reached the halfway point. The discussion turns toward, as one of the mercenaries questions whether the barbarian possesses genuine strength, noting that he is merely a figure in the emperor's tales and has yet to engage in battle. In the conversation, someone remarked that who was assumed to be at the lowest rung of the hierarchy depended on them for safety. They proposed that it might be prudent to assess his true capabilities. Within the confines of the carriage, a heavy silence settled between and a mercenary made his way toward the carriage, expressing a desire to converse with. Under the terms of their contract with her, he reminded her that they were mercenaries who were risking their lives to complete this mission, conveyed her profound appreciation for their willingness to accept the perilous mission that had sent others running at the mere mention of its nature. She acknowledged that, without their courage, she wouldn't have had the chance to even attempt it. The mercenary expressed his concerns, noting that something was troubling him. He observed that the barbarian had yet to engage in a single battle. The group expressed their desire to verify whether the barbarian was genuinely worthy of the preferential treatment he was being given. The captain insisted he had attempted to halt their actions, but his words fell on deaf ears. Having been attentively listening, stepped in to express that while he was open to the idea of testing his strength, the timing wasn't right at that moment. He mentions that there were other guests who had arrived prior to their visit. An unsettling new voice reverberated through the air, filled with satisfaction at the presence of frail humans, whom it regarded as a rare treat. The unexpected emergence of this new danger left everyone in a state of shock. A gigantic, fearsome white serpent emerged, taunting them to scream and suffer to their heart's content, promising that their agony would only enhance the taste of its feast. The serpent's immense presence inflicted such agony upon, and the mercenaries that they could not help but cry out. Advanced confidently, instructing the serpent to halt its approach. He proclaimed that the individuals present were under his protection and directed the creature to retreat. The serpent inquired about its presence, reminding him of the snowfield's strict rules that forbade venturing beyond the tribe's territory. Responded dismissively, asserting that the matter was not the serpent's concern. This reply incensed the serpent, who admonished him not to be absurd. The serpent declared its identity, questioning how a mere barbarian could have the audacity to command it, the creature destined for eternal life. With a hint of sarcasm, suggested that the creature required some discipline. Without hesitation, he hurled himself towards it, unleashing a fierce assault. The impact culminates in a tremendous burst of energy. A formidable shockwave was unleashed. The force of the explosion and its powerful effect caused to let out a loud scream. Towered over the vanquished serpent, observing that it was the sort that only responded after enduring a thorough thrashing. Observing the spectacle with amazement, listened as confidently promised her a swift conclusion to the event. Delivered a conclusive and powerful strike, bringing the battle to its end. In an instant, the serpent was obliterated by a dazzling burst of light. Following the recent events, the mercenaries who had previously questioned strength found themselves pleading for his pardon. Showing magnanimity, reassured them that he bore no ill will, acknowledging that it was natural for them to be wary of someone unfamiliar. Approached, indicating that he had something he wanted to ask. Observing her attire and manner of speech, he realized that she appeared to be more than merely a straightforward envoy of her family. Curiosity piqued. He wondered about her personal reasons for embarking on such a perilous journey. After a moment of hesitation, disclosed that she was the eldest daughter of, who was either a concubine or the second wife of Lord. The young woman recounts her mother's story, detailing how she arrived for a political marriage only to be manipulated and discarded, leaving her a powerless and sorrowful figure. Revealed that, despite being family in name, she and her mother were treated more like servants. Almost immediately, she wished she hadn't shared so much. She acknowledged that she had willingly chosen to embark on this perilous adventure. The statement was made, emphasizing the necessity for someone to take the lead and serve as a role model. Expressed his understanding of her character, noting her intelligence, avarice, and strong ambition. The exit of the snowfield suddenly came into view before them. The mercenaries stood in astonishment, taken aback by the unexpected sight that unfolded before their eyes. As they gazed upon the vibrant green grass, it signaled the conclusion of their trek through the snow. Expressed her gratitude, too, who then assured her that they could make their way back through the empire effortlessly once they had completed the sale of the weapons. Inquired about his reasons for labeling her as intelligent and driven. Affirmed that his statement was precise in its intent. He started to elaborate on his reasoning, noting that her prestigious family had fallen into significant disarray due to financial difficulties. He mentioned, despite her being born to a concubine, she could forge a path to redemption for herself even as her family's situation teetered on the brink of disaster. In that situation, he wonders aloud who the people will choose to trust and follow. He arrives at the conclusion that her genuine aim is to take control of the family's true power. He inquires whether he is in error and confesses that his response is flawless. Observed that it was a familiar tale for the offspring of a concubine to undertake perilous trials in order to claim their family's legacy. Observed the barbarian with a mixture of surprise and admiration, recognizing an intelligence in him that set him apart from the shallow thinkers she had encountered before. She couldn't help but wonder how it would feel to wield his incredible strength, the very force that effortlessly vanquished the white serpent without suffering a single injury. In light of this, she extends an invitation too, suggesting he join her should he ever contemplate departing from the snowfield. Politely turns down her offer, mentioning that he has some pending affairs to manage first. Decided to extend a gesture of goodwill by presenting him with a piece of her jewelry. She advised him that, should he ever find himself free and seeking the Akasha family, he ought to present them with this particular item. Received the gift with a grateful heart, the delight evident in her smile. Expressed her gratitude, and hoped silently that their paths would cross once more as they parted ways. As the carriage rolled away, stood watching it disappear into the distance. 5 years had passed, and in the midst of the pristine, white snowfield, a message emerged. It announced that had successfully finished quest number 1784, having fulfilled all the required conditions. A new message appeared, informing him that he could now leave the snowfield. He started to make his way through a glimmering barrier. Believed that at long last, he was beginning his journey into the fantasy realm he had always dreamed of entering. He took pleasure in the aromas of grass, animals, and the river, fragrances that he would never have encountered in the snowy landscape. He felt a deep satisfaction, his spirits lifted by the delight of these fresh scents. He raised his voice towards the distant snowfield, making a promise to himself that he would never set foot there again. He pondered his arrival in the fantastical and mysterious world he had long dreamed of, a place he once believed was unreachable. Despite the journey beginning in a disastrously incorrect manner, he had somehow managed to endure and survive. He declared his plan to relish the wonders of this world, filled with dragons, elves, magic, and swords. His unwavering longing to reach the fantasy world, he felt, was the force that sustained him through the torment. Suddenly, he became aware of a congregation of entities in his vicinity. He believes the group of buildings ahead is a village, and feels a thrill of excitement at the prospect of finally encountering a civilized town. He recalls the days spent among the unknowing barbarians who seemed unaware of the necessity for proper shelter. This memory stirs in him a deep yearning for the thoughtfully crafted environments of human settlements. The young man pondered the most courteous way to present himself. A voice reached his ears, proclaiming to the dear elf villagers that this land would become their new home. He observed a group of elves as they unloaded their belongings and joyfully celebrated their new home. A young elf, filled with anxiety, looked up at an elder, seeking reassurance about the safety of their location. The elder, with a calm demeanor, confidently assured the young elf that they were indeed in a secure place. Despite the remoteness and inaccessibility of the area to humans, the young man's concerns persisted. He voiced his worries about how close the snowfield was, and the elder realized that his anxiety stemmed from the potential emergence of monsters. The elder offered reassurance, explaining that for millennia nothing had emerged from the snowfield. Furthermore, a barrier had been established as an added safeguard. Using ancient elven magic, he elaborated on how they had crafted a magical concealment barrier. This enchantment transformed the area to appear as just an ordinary forest. As long as the barrier held, it ensured that no outsider would be able to find their way to them. He mentioned that even in the event of monsters arriving, they were safeguarded by Her Majesty the Queen. The monsters of the snowfield found themselves powerless against this figure, unable to lay even a single claw upon them. As continued to walk, a sudden sensation of having ripped through something struck him. He pondered if there might be something peculiar in the area, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just crossed a hidden barrier. While traversing the forest, pondered the remaining distance he needed to cover. All of a sudden, without any warning, as he wandered, he stumbled upon a little elf girl who appeared to be lost. Encountering an actual elf, a member of the mythical races he had always envisioned, filled him with immense joy, affirming that his continued existence had indeed been meaningful. The young girl trembled with fear as tears streamed down her cheeks. Upon recognizing that she had strayed beyond familiar paths, she became aware that she was now lost. Walked up to her and greeted her warmly. The sudden sight of him filled the girl with such panic that she lost consciousness and fainted. Swiftly moved and managed to catch her just in time. He found himself confused about his next steps after she had fainted before they could have their conversation. Ultimately, he made the decision to return her to her village. He recalled the tales of elves and legends being a race known for their peace and benevolence. With this in mind, he hoped that by returning the child, they would greet him with kindness, and that he would have the opportunity to enjoy their warm hospitality. He eagerly anticipated the upcoming experience. As he reached the village with the child in his arms, a woman, likely the child's mother, shrieked in horror, startled by the unexpected sight of a human among them. The elves responded with hostility, demanding to know the stranger's identity and how he had breached their protective barrier. Came to the realization that events were unfolding quite differently from what he had anticipated. The mother kept raising her voice in distress. The elf elder was taken aback, questioning how a human had managed to penetrate their safeguarded territory, which was shielded by a barrier. An elf approached him with urgency, informing him about a crack in the barrier. This news sent the elder into a state of panic. He immediately inquired about the location of Her Majesty the Queen. In response, he learned that she had embarked on a brief reconnaissance tour. Attempts to convey that he is not an adversary, yet a warrior menacingly vows to pursue him relentlessly across the globe, unless he brings the child back. The elder announced that their hiding place had been discovered. With the barrier broken, the elder reasoned that the humans must have arrived completely ready for whatever lay ahead. He pondered the duration for which the humans had been on their trail, became aware that they perceived him as a kidnapper, prompting him to resolve to clarify the misunderstanding before anything else. He gently set the now conscious child on the ground. He instructed her to return to her own community. A sense of fear overcame the child as they glanced at the man with the intimidating appearance, prompting them to flee in haste. The child cried and screamed with such intensity that began to question whether his own face could truly be that terrifying. In the snowfield, he had believed his appearance to be quite acceptable, so the sudden surprise caught him off guard. He attempted once more to communicate with them, clarifying that he had brought the child back and was not a threat. The elder, with a commanding voice, announced the release of the hostage and immediately directed everyone to launch an assault. In response, the elves swiftly took aim, directing their arrows toward him. Arrows flew through the air, and questioned whether anyone was actually paying attention to what he was saying. Pondered the circumstances at hand. In the stories passed down through generations, elves were depicted as gentle, nature-loving, and harmonious beings. However, the elves he encountered were anything but. They were fierce and untamed. He realized that ultimately elves were creatures of the wild, and perhaps their existence was harsher and more primal than he had ever envisioned. He realized that nature operates on the principle of survival of the fittest, which is far from being a peaceful existence. In this light, he found the harshness of the elves to be understandable. Arrows descended upon him, bouncing off his body without effect, and with a sense of calm acceptance, he acknowledged this as his reality. The elves stared in disbelief as the elder pondered over the type of magical instrument wielded. Despite their astonishment, the elder instructed the archers to persist with their assault, convinced that must have boundaries to his power. Resolved to soothe the crowd by releasing an enormous surge of purple energy. A powerful shockwave ripples outward from the explosion. The force propelled the elves, causing them to soar through the air. The elder stood in a daze, trying to comprehend the recent events. Positioned within the crater formed by the explosion, reiterated that he was not an adversary to them. He mused quietly, realizing he might have slightly overestimated his own strength. In that instant, found himself under assault as another arrow, enveloped in a fiery aura reminiscent of a majestic phoenix, hurtled toward him. The attack results in a formidable burst of flames. The Elf Queen initiated the assault and inquired about the unfolding situation. The elder reveals to her that they have been attacked by a human. The queen realized that her worst fears had come true, recognizing that the area was no longer secure. Attempts to communicate with her, holding on to the hope that she will be receptive to his tale. The elder could hardly believe that remained upright after enduring a direct blow from her majesty. The queen inquired of whether he was yet another formidable adversary, with intentions of bringing them harm. The woman proclaimed her disdain for humans, labeling them as despicable creatures, and went on to introduce herself as the queen of the Leaf tribe. With unwavering determination, she drew back her bow, the arrow glowing with an ethereal light. Her mind was set. He would indeed suffer the consequences for his audacious desire. Experienced a wave of frustration, questioning the inability to communicate despite sharing a common language. He pondered whether she was purposely disregarding him, or if the discord between humans and elves had truly deteriorated to such an extent. Recalling the harsh lesson from the snowfield, he resolved that resorting to force was inevitable. If persuasion failed, he believed it necessary to compel obedience through strength. The queen let loose her enchanted arrow. The arrow morphed into an enormous, ghostly dragon's head and surged toward. Focused intensely, channeling energy into his fist as he himself for a counterattack. With a mighty swing of his fist, he struck the ghostly dragon, unleashing a tremendous explosion. The unexpected outcome left the queen in a state of disbelief. Gazed at his clenched fist, a pang of regret washing over him as he realized he might have pushed his powers too far, which resulted in the queen being hurled backward. The queen collapsed onto the ground, overwhelmed by her defeat. Realized that he should have exercised more restraint over his abilities. In the heat of the brief confrontation, the queen quickly recognizes her opponent's strength, acknowledging that their abilities are at least of a transcendent level. She ponders the reason behind the presence of someone so formidable in this place. The Elf Queen acknowledged its formidable strength and swiftly commanded her subjects to evacuate the vicinity to ensure their safety. Upon receiving her directive, the elves retreated. The queen expressed her recognition of strength, yet firmly conveyed her belief that he would never reach his objective. Reflected on the unfolding chaos, realizing that his simple intention of having a conversation had spiraled into a total catastrophe. Within the grand hall, the queen commenced a potent incantation. calling forth a horned entity that bore the most pristine of flames. In a display of power, she called forth a mighty spirit that took the shape of a blazing bull. A boy by the name of Vigo. Excitement surged through as he contemplated the terrifying and strange creatures that inhabited the snowfield, realizing that this was a genuine summoning. He recalled that while a few of the snowfield's creatures possessed enchanting, almost magical looks, the majority had an appearance that was grotesque. The beast standing in front of him, a bull adorned with blazing horns, was unlike anything he had encountered before. He felt a surge of excitement as he realized he was witnessing a genuine spirit, a moment that embodied true fantasy. The queen commanded Vigo to dispatch the enemy. However, the high-ranking fire spirit grumbled, expressing its disdain for summoning contracts, viewing them merely as bothersome and troublesome obligations. The queen commanded him to keep quiet. In her thoughts, she acknowledged that powerful spirits often possessed age and arrogance. She realized that without the assistance of another tribe, sealing this contract would have been impossible, and she had never anticipated needing to summon him in such a manner. Once more, she demanded that Vigo carry out the terms of his contract. Vigo inquired about whether the contract obligated him to kill the human standing before him. However, his resolve wavered when he observed something unusual about. Observing this imposing presence, he questioned whether it was indeed human. Caught in a dreamlike state, remained entranced by the magnificent fantasy scene unfolding around him. However, the awe quickly faded into disappointment as the realization struck him that the intended victim was none other than himself. Vigo expressed disdain at the human's boldness in desiring something as pure as a race born from nature, resolving to reduce him to ashes. Vigo sprinted in its direction with determination, himself to intercept the oncoming assault. Out of nowhere, the queen grimaced as a shockwave struck her. As her eyes flutter open, she is taken aback to witness effortlessly intercepting Vigo's assault and seizing his horn. His lips curled into a smile as he mused that witnessing a monstrous form brought him more comfort, knowing he wouldn't hesitate to destroy it completely. The queen observed the unfolding events with a sense of dread and disbelief, launched a powerful attack, triggering a massive explosion that obliterated the forest. The sound reverberates off the nearby rocks, sending its echoes up into the atmosphere. The explosion's force elicited a scream from the queen. The lush green forest transformed into an enormous crater, leaving the queen staring in shock at the devastation before her eyes. Moved steadily towards the fallen queen, who lay at the center of the crater, gradually closing the distance between them. The once mighty elf queen, now vanquished, implores him with desperation in her voice to show mercy and allow her people to live. Calmly reassures her that he poses no threat to them. The queen stood in astonishment, her voice failing her. After extensive discussions, the elves came to the realization that he was not genuinely their adversary. The queen extended a sincere apology too, acknowledging that they had rushed to make a judgment about him. She experienced a profound sense of regret, as she came to realize how impolite they had been when they mistakenly assumed the individual who brought the lost child back was an adversary. Expressed his understanding of their situation, acknowledging that they had been forced from their homes by humans. However, he confessed his disappointment that his words had gone unheard. The queen sought reassurance from him once more, ensuring he was not among the humans pursuing them. In response, clarified that this was his first encounter with an elf, noting that none could be found in the white snowfield. The queen felt a jolt of surprise at the mention of the snowfield, realizing she was in the presence of the notorious Ashen Barbarian. Acknowledged that this was indeed the name by which outsiders referred to him. The queen felt a wave of disbelief wash over her, as she had always believed it was beyond the realm of possibility for humans to endure in that place. She expressed her concern, wondering if his arrival from that place implied that others could also make their way there. Expressed his uncertainty about the situation, admitting he wasn't certain, but he doubted that anyone else would escape in the same manner he had. The individual elaborated that within the snowfield, certain rules existed which even mighty creatures such as dragons were unable to defy. For reasons unknown, he alone managed to evade these constraints by undertaking something referred to as a quest, suspecting that his situation was an exceptional anomaly. The queen felt a wave of relief wash over her. then turned her attention to inquire about the condition of the creature she had summoned. He straightforwardly pointed out to her that the bull had been severed in two. The queen calmed his fears by explaining that spirits were natural entities and that it had merely gone back to the spirit realm. Regretting her earlier impoliteness, she inquired if he wanted anything, vowing to fulfill his request. Pondered the idea of a spirit, and wondered aloud whether beings that were not elves could form a contract with one. Initially, the queen dismisses the idea as implausible. However, she soon rethinks her stance, acknowledging that certain humans, those deeply connected to nature, possess the ability to form bonds with spirits. After giving it some thought, she suggested to him that he should visit if he wanted to form a contract with a spirit. She described the area as the revered domain of all elves, a place where their deity dwelled. She suggested that within this hallowed ground, his desire might possibly be granted. Wondered aloud whether it was possible for someone like him, a human, to visit that place. The queen considered the possibility and suggested that with her endorsement, it could happen. She then proposed to reveal the location to him, but only if he promised to keep it confidential. The queen pondered silently, realizing that was the ultimate goal for anyone dedicated to the study of elves. She believed that elves kept the location hidden from other races, convinced that humans presented a significant threat to this sacred site. Against her better judgment, she resolved to place her trust in him and extended a gleaming crystal toward him. Received it with gratitude. The queen conveyed that upon reaching the area, he would undoubtedly face a trial from their god. She conveyed her belief in his eventual success and wished him a safe journey. In response, expressed his gratitude. The queen made a formal introduction, revealing her name as the sovereign of the Leaf tribe, and inquired about his identity. A man stepped forward, identifying himself with a strong voice, as known among his peers as the Barbarian. As time gradually went by, in the dense forest moved swiftly, his pace quick and determined. At the edge of the Barcan territory within the kingdom of, the guards were thrown into a state of alarm as a deafening sound accompanied by a colossal force drew near. The captain of the guards commanded that the bell be sounded, summoning all the guards to gather without delay. Appeared abruptly on the scene. Upon his forceful descent, a tremor rippled through the ground, sending dust and debris swirling into the air. The sudden appearance of the figure left the guard captain in a state of shock. Upon encountering the newcomers, offered a warm greeting and inquired whether they were indeed the guards. The guards appeared both perplexed and wary. The group speculated about the origin of the noise, questioning whether he might be responsible and if he posed a threat to them. A guard's attention is drawn to, observing the distinct gray strands in his hair and the noticeable scar marking his chest. In that moment of stark realization, it dawned on him with a jolt that he could very well be the fabled Ashen Barbarian. As drew nearer, the guards lifted their weapons defensively, cautioning him to halt his advance or face their aggression. With a composed demeanor, assures them that he poses no threat and expresses his hope that they will find tranquility. A sense of unease surrounded one of the guards as he cautiously inquired about the man's intentions. In a specific direction, extended his finger to indicate something of interest. The guard inquired about his intentions while gesturing towards the city gate. Conveyed his wish to explore their land. The guard stood frozen in disbelief at his unexpected words. The scene transitioned to a room where the guard captain inquired about his intentions, questioning if he was simply passing through. Expressed a desire to remain for a period, although he admitted uncertainty about the duration of his stay. The captain inquired about the man's name, to which he responded that it was. When the captain inquired about any evidence or a person who could vouch for him, replied that he had no such proof. Reminisces about the crest that had bestowed upon him. Her instructions echo in his mind, reminding him to present it to the Akasha family should he ever manage to escape the snowfield. He held out the crest, inquiring if it would be enough to meet the requirements. Elaborated on the significance of the emblem, identifying it as the crest belonging to the Akasha family. He mentioned that it had been passed down to him by a descendant of that noble line. Upon hearing the name, the captain immediately recalled the Akasha family as being the esteemed merchant family from the kingdom of. The captain remembered stories of a merchant family that had arrived in the snowfield several years prior. he observed that the influence of the Akasha family had expanded swiftly in recent times, following a shift in leadership within the family. Inquired once more about whether the crest was sufficient to verify his identity. The captain, examining it closely, remarked that while it did not appear to be counterfeit, it was challenging to authenticate since it originated from a different kingdom. The captain determined that while the crest did not fully confirm the situation, it held enough significance to be of use. As a result, he permitted to enter, stipulating that it must be under one condition. He explained that the requirement was simply to verify that he posed no threat. The captain informed that there were 3 other individuals whose identities had yet to be, all attempting to gain access to the territory. The requirement set forth was that needed to join forces with these individuals and successfully complete a nearby dungeon, demonstrating that they were not a danger. To his surprise, he considered this task less challenging than anticipated. Nodded in agreement to the captain's condition, though the captain promptly introduced an additional stipulation. The second requirement stated that once the dungeon was completed, needed to provide them with a comprehensive report detailing all aspects of the operation. Grasped the captain's ingenious strategy, which involved having those with uncertain identities monitor one another. Through their observations and reports, he intended to uncover anyone suspicious among them. Feeling flustered, the captain quickly shifted the conversation and inquired whether truly belonged to the barbarian tribes. Affirms his identity as a barbarian. The captain, astonished by the encounter, confessed that he had never encountered a barbarian quite like this one before. He had previously assumed that barbarians were merely an unlearned people. Concluding the conversation, he instructed the barbarian to begin his journey. The setting transitions to a waiting room occupied by a man named. A knight by reputation, he expresses his dissatisfaction with the prospect of entering a dungeon alongside a rogue known for exploiting others. A thief known as responded with sarcasm, questioning whether the elderly man was taking out his frustration on him because another thief had swindled him out of all his money. His temper flared as he questioned the audacity of a mere thief who dared to insult a revered holy knight. Ridiculed him by questioning whether genuine holy knights would wear battered armor and remarked that if he were a true knight, he wouldn't be in this situation at all. In his mind, he decides that is merely a drifting fighter, realizing that they are both akin to the same type of insignificant creatures. In a sudden surge of anger, his temperament flared, and he issued a fierce threat of confrontation. Scoffed at the man, questioning whether his worn-out armor could really offer him any protection. A priestess, who was the 3rd member of the team, stepped in to intervene, urging them to cease their actions. The priestess named from shared her worries about the task of exploring a dungeon alongside the current group. The guard captain stepped in and informed the group that a minimum of 4 individuals was required to enter the dungeon, and that an additional person would be joining them. The priestess silently wished that the final individual would be ordinary. Meanwhile, the captain informed her that she could make her own assessment because the person had just shown up. As walked into the room, the team members already gathered there were taken aback by his unexpected arrival. With a cheerful demeanor, inquired if the individuals before him were part of his team. The team members were taken aback, their expressions painted with surprise. Couldn't help but comment on the sheer enormity of the figure before them, while the priestess questioned whether this being was even human. Meanwhile, was keenly aware of the overwhelming force that seemed to radiate from the stranger. Greeted warmly, the guard captain suggested that they take the opportunity to introduce themselves, while he briefly exited the room. Started by stating his name and identifying himself as a barbarian. The man inquired about the thief's name, prompting the hesitant response as the young man introduced himself as. Shifted his attention to the holy knight, who introduced himself as, then inquired whether wielded holy power. Feeling a wave of nervousness, described himself as a rather unique holy knight, admitting his inability to utilize it. The woman reveals her identity as a priestess devoted to the deity associated with lies and deception. Questioned the reason behind the lack of confirmation of her identity, especially considering she held the position of a priestess. In her explanation, she conveyed that the deity she worshipped did not hold a high status in the eyes of many. Once the introductions concluded, the guard captain declared that they should commence their journey if everyone was prepared. The atmosphere is heavy with silence and tension as the team progresses on their path. Their presence was heralded by the guard accompanying them, who announced their arrival. The guard gestures towards the entrance of the dungeon. He described the dungeon as having 3 floors, filled with undead creatures lurking within. The goal was to uncover the interior and discover a crest hidden within. Before commencing their task, wanted to hear explanation of the plan. He began to explain his point, referring to with a formal sir. However, with a cheerful demeanor, insisted that he should dispense with the formalities since they were comrades. Kassan took charge of the situation, designating the roles for their mission. He decided that, and the warrior, would take on the responsibility of forming the front line. Meanwhile, he himself would focus on the task of inspecting the path ahead for any potential traps. The man mentions that the priestess is set to aid the fight from behind the front lines, utilizing her sacred abilities. Nodded in agreement with the plan, leaving puzzled. With great enthusiasm, declared their intention to commence the journey. With at the forefront, the team made their way into the ominously named Dark Dungeon. Upon entering, observed the complete darkness enveloping the space and noticed the lack of any typical traps or keys, which struck him as unusually mundane and aroused his suspicion. Abruptly halted the group, drawing their attention to what he claimed was a monster, even though could see nothing unusual. He gestured toward the bone fragments strewn across the ground, clarifying that these were skeletons poised to rise and launch an attack if they dared to approach further. Came to the unsettling conclusion that the guard captain was aware of the situation. He understood that the dungeon served not only as a challenge, but also as a means to eliminate unwelcome outsiders. His thoughts drifted toward the concept of skeletons. Described how skeletons possessed formidable strength, continuing to move and fight despite sustaining injuries or losing limbs. He explained that their defense was formidable due to their composition of bone, which elevated the dungeon's difficulty beyond what was anticipated. Resumed his leadership role, instructing the priestess to harness her divine power, advising to position his shield and prompting to prepare himself too. In the midst of the intense battle, he detailed his strategy, emphasizing the importance of seizing every opportunity that arose. He encouraged them to focus their attacks on the skeleton's vulnerable neck, underscoring the need to strike repeatedly because of its formidable durability. Observing in action, admired his leadership skills. As soon as they moved forward, from beneath the earth a skeleton emerged, rising with an eerie grace. The team members themselves for the upcoming confrontation. With a calm demeanor, merely lifted his hand. With one effortless strike, he crushed the skeleton's skull into pieces. With a graceful motion, he gently brushed the magical dust off his hand. The rest of the team stood in utter disbelief. Acknowledged too that his observation had been correct. Once the skeletons' heads were smashed, they ceased to move. Chuckled uneasily, attempting to clarify his intentions. He insisted that his words had been misunderstood. Breaking a skeleton's bones with just one strike was nearly an unattainable feat, even for talented swordsmen, unless they possessed the ability to. His abilities were enhanced by the use of aura, elevating his strength to a level that understanding. Pondered further, elaborating on the strategy to overcome a skeleton fortified by dungeon magic. He reasoned that the key to victory lay in relentlessly targeting its neck, aiming to disconnect akin to chopping down a tree. Upon reflection, he realized that feat of crushing the skeleton's skull into dust with just one strike logic. He acknowledged internally that he'd always perceived as powerful from the outset, yet the true extent of his strength was beyond anything he had envisioned. The team members stared at in disbelief, while questioned whether could truly be human. Expressed the need for them to continue progressing onward. The rest of the team quickly echoed their agreement, their voices tinged with a hint of unease. Observed their sudden rush with amusement. As they moved along their path, amused himself by toying with the skull of a skeleton. A large group of skeletons suddenly appeared before them, blocking their path. As the tension in the air thickened, each individual themselves for the challenging fight ahead. Intervened to halt their actions and requested a favor. He expressed his desire to manage the skeletons on his own, explaining that there were certain things he wanted to verify. The team members, impressed by his abilities, quickly consented to his request. Expressed her gratitude to them. Found himself contemplating his next move. moved closer to the skeletons, intrigued by their intricate structure. A skeleton suddenly lunges toward him, launching an attack. He appeared to be carefully studying the way it moved and how it was built. He then began to speak to one, treating it like a training companion, and inquired about its next move. A skeleton advanced menacingly, brandishing its sword and targeting him with a fierce strike. Swiftly evades the incoming strike. With a playful grin, he reached out and took hold of the skeleton's hand, curious about how it would respond to his bold gesture. With nothing but his own strength, he proceeded to snap the skeleton's arm. The skeleton found itself taken aback by the unexpected turn of events, feeling a sting of indignation. With deft precision, he seized the fallen sword using his other hand, ridiculed the scenario, making a remark about the skeleton's skill in changing which hand it used. As the skeleton lunged forward, swiftly reached out and seized its bony hand once more. With a swift motion, he snapped the blade and proceeded to disassemble the skeleton's arm. The skeleton launched another assault, yet effortlessly its attack. He intercepted the skeleton's direct attack with his hands and grinned, marveling at the creature's display of intelligence. A member of the team expressed their incredulity with a deep groan, stood in utter disbelief, grappling with the truth of strength, which appeared impossibly formidable. Regarded the scene before him, internally concluding that the individual was the epitome of a true barbarian. Carefully detached the skull from the skeleton and then forcefully stomped on it, shattering it beneath his foot. He expressed his regret to the team for making them wait, but the team members, clearly impressed and awestruck, reassured him that he had the freedom to act as he pleased. Proposed that they move forward, and the team, though anxious, gave their hesitant consent. Upon arriving at the entrance to the second floor, they paused momentarily. Feeling weary, proposed that they pause for a brief rest. This agreement brought a wave of relief over. During their respite, mentioned that he had a few inquiries regarding the dungeon. The priestess extended an invitation to him, signaling that he could proceed with his inquiry. Hesitantly starts his speech, confessing with a hint of shyness that he is aware of his own significant gaps in understanding. Hayes conveyed his encouragement by expressing that the eagerness to learn was a commendable trait. He then inquired about the specific topics that piqued the young man's curiosity. Observed that the dungeon lay in close proximity to the territory. He wonders aloud about the potential issues that might arise from having dungeons and monsters so close to human settlements. Elaborated that typically, monsters from the dungeon remained within its confines. However, he acknowledged that there were occasional exceptions to this rule, but these were managed in advance. Explains that dungeons form on their own, often taking the shape of caves or towers. He observed that the majority seemed to be situated close to areas with large populations. Mentioned that whenever a dungeon emerged, the territory would evaluate its level of threat, and then individuals like themselves were dispatched to handle the situation. Inquired whether the beings emerged within the territory itself. The priestess explained that they materialized at a specific distance away from populated regions. Inquires about the possibility of receiving a reward for successfully conquering the dungeon. Nodded in agreement, elaborating on the situation. He mentioned that typically, a formidable opponent awaited on the highest floor, and overcoming this challenge would yield a variety of rewards. He assured that the treasures obtained from a dungeon of this caliber would be quite impressive. Grinned, feeling as if he were engaged in a playful game. When Hayes inquired about his actions, simply mentioned that he had been speaking to himself. He posed a final inquiry, wondering about the creators of these mysterious dungeons. The team was surprised by the question, and Hayes responded that the formations appeared naturally, with no one responsible for creating them. Thought it was peculiar, noting how they seemed to emerge close to areas bustling with people, almost as if they were intentionally designed for discovery. He kept analyzing the situation, noting how these entities seemed to show up close to human habitats, enticing individuals with promises of rewards. He determined that it appeared far too contrived to be a natural occurrence. Was taken aback as she came to understand the validity behind his statement. She acknowledged that she had never considered it previously because it appeared to be obvious to her. Pondered internally, reflecting on how he had never doubted it, as it was a widely accepted fact. It baffled him how this outsider could challenge something so evidently true. He finishes his reflections by asserting that barbarians remain an uneducated and brutal group, characterized by their cruelty and lack of mercy, a reality that has persisted unchanged. Pondered silently, questioning whether this barbarian could truly be considered normal. Gathered the team's focus, inquiring whether they had sufficiently recuperated. The team members, filled with trepidation, acknowledged that they indeed had done so. With a bright demeanor, suggests to the group that they should resume their journey. The team continued their journey, delving further into the depths of the dungeon. During their journey, they came across an object that piqued their curiosity, prompting to inquire about its nature. Pointed out that the object was a treasure chest, a reward from the labyrinth, and informed that it could be his if he managed to unlock it. He mentioned that unlocking a chest of such complexity demanded the expertise of a highly skilled thief, one who had demonstrated proficiency in the art of. Expressed regret over the fact that a thief with such expertise wouldn't have to resort to entering a dungeon at all, implying they should just leave it behind. However, merely instructed to proceed with opening it. Stood frozen in disbelief as gestured towards the object, identifying it as a treasure chest and reminding of his identity as a thief. Eagerly shared his thoughts, expressing that the very heart of a thief's craft lay in the art of opening treasure chests. He was thrilled at the prospect of witnessing a thief's skills firsthand. Acknowledged the validity of his perspective, yet a significant issue lingered. Had he possessed the capability to resolve it, he wouldn't find himself in the current predicament. The young man grappled with his inner turmoil, exposing his deep-seated insecurity. Despite his aspirations, he was merely a petty thief, overlooked by the Thieves' Guild and lacking any genuine talent in picking locks. He couldn't bring himself to reveal the truth to, worried that the eager look in his eyes might shift to one of disappointment. Upon noticing the hesitation, stepped in, questioning whether the individual was unable to accomplish even this simple task, and went on to label him as useless. Fear motivated, leading him to consent to give it a shot. While he focused on his task, a chilling sensation crept down his spine as intense stare bore into his back. Fear gripped him tightly, convincing him that failure could spell the end for him. In a moment of desperation, he struggled to recall the techniques he had observed another thief employing during his time as that thief's porter. With unwavering determination, he risks everything, channeling every ounce of his strength into the task at hand. Gazed at him, her expression marked by confusion at the intensity of his effort. With a click, managed to open the chest, and with tears welling up in his eyes, he declared his success. Felt a deep sense of admiration, marveling at the unexpected sight of a skilled thief deftly opening a treasure chest on her own. Offered his praise, acknowledging the remarkable quality of his work. Experiences a deep existential crisis, a rarity in his life. He had always taken pride in his relentless efforts to endure, yet now, for the first time, he doubts this conviction. He wonders if he has genuinely been striving to his fullest potential all along. This realization shatters his sense of pride. Inquired about the worth of the treasure, prompting to estimate that it was sufficient to support an ordinary family comfortably for approximately 1 month. Approached with a request to take charge of arranging the rewards. Started organizing the treasure. The intense fear overwhelmed him, causing a sudden, terrified cry to escape his lips. The team moved forward with care, proceeding on their journey. Upon discovering yet another skeleton sprawled on the ground, instructs the others to pause. Upon spotting 4 skulls, quickly deduced that there were 4 skeletons in total. He confidently declared his intention to handle 3 of them himself. The team stood in shock, unable to process what had just happened. With a smile, informs them that he will leave the final skeleton for them to handle. Came to the understanding that this was a genuine battle and a trial for them. The rest of the team grasped the gravity of the situation and shared the same sentiment. The sight of skeletons slowly piecing themselves together from a chaotic heap of bones sends waves of fear through. 4 skeletons emerged, ready to confront them. Issued a command for everyone to take action, prompting the priestess to start reciting her prayer. The skeletons advanced swiftly in their direction. A figure lunged in the direction of. Gathered the remaining skeletons, instructing them to preserve the rarity of the scene before them. In the midst of the confrontation, a skeletal figure lunged at, who swiftly raised his shield to fend off the assault. Swiftly evades the incoming strike. leaped forward, ready to strike the same skeleton. Upon casting the spell, he summoned the Shadow of Illusion. The projectile struck the skeletal figure. The force causes it to lose balance and stumble. Observed the scene with amusement, her laughter ringing out as she noted how unusual it was to witness such a perfect demonstration of coordinated party combat. After dispatching the 3 skeletons with ease, he remarked that he could finally relax and enjoy the spectacle. Persistently attempts to strike the skeleton. The team members came to the understanding that was putting them through a test. The lone remaining skeleton appeared bewildered as it stood amidst the absence of its vanished comrades. Internally acknowledges that displaying any sign of weakness would lead to their demise. Once the battle concluded, the team seemed utterly drained of energy. Believed that everyone who arrived at the snowfield possessed remarkable strength. The team moved forward, encountering more skeletons on the 3rd floor. However, with guidance, they navigated the challenges with ease and ultimately arrived at their intended location. Upon reaching the innermost chamber of the dungeon, the group paused to take in their surroundings. Upon entering the chamber, they discovered the dungeon boss, a skeletal knight seated regally upon a throne. Felt a jolt of shock, questioning the presence of such a creature in this place. Inquires about the nature of the monster, wondering if it differs from the ones they have encountered before. Affirms this, noting that the creature possesses immense strength. She elaborated on the fact that the skeletal knight was a foe meant to be tackled solely by those of knight-level skill. This creature was far beyond their capability to manage. She then pondered aloud the consequences if they chose to retreat. Elaborates on the procedure, noting that typically the territory would initiate an investigation. Should the findings indicate that the decision was justified, the situation would generally be settled smoothly. Considered the team's choice to retreat, and found it to be a sensible course of action. Seated upon its throne, the skeletal knight exudes a menacing aura. Moved closer, marveling at the skeleton's ability to hold its shape independently. From its ancient throne, the skeletal knight stood, its bony hand reaching to unsheathe the sword at its side. He issued a warning about the potential danger it posed. The shield rose swiftly in her attempt to deflect the powerful strike. The weapon fragmented upon impact, prompting to step in and deflect the strike with his shield. The force of the shockwave sent the team members sprawling backward, yet stood firm, untouched by the chaos. Found himself astonished by the sheer force contained in just one attack. The skeletal knight charged fiercely in its direction. Observed its advance with a serene demeanor. With one powerful strike, he utterly destroys it. As the skeletal knight disintegrated into fragments, the entire team stood in complete astonishment. Brushed off his hands and inquired plainly if that was everything. As a new treasure chest emerged, turned his attention to with a call. He inquired about the possibility of opening it, while in a state of alarm, insisted that it was out of the question due to a sophisticated lock that exceeded his abilities. Remarked that it was unfortunate and concurred, suggesting they ought to leave the chest behind. Pays no attention to the situation and gets ready to forcibly break open the chest. Was taken aback. With a mighty strike, broke open the chest, revealing its contents. Observed that the reward could potentially be larger under these circumstances, and suggested that, should gather the loot. Pondered the situation, noting that he had never encountered the idea of breaking open a treasure chest through brute force. He questioned in his mind why had requested his help to unlock the first chest when it seemed possible to simply shatter it open. As they made their way out of the dungeon, it started to vanish behind them. Noted that once a dungeon was completely cleared, it vanished. He came to the conclusion that there had been no secret room on this occasion. Found the idea of a hidden room intriguing, and informed him that such rooms did exist, though they were uncommon, a detail that piqued curiosity even further. The guard captain stood in surprise, astonished by their unexpected and rapid return. The captain inquired about the dungeon, and responded that it had been a highly gratifying experience. The captain informed the group of his intention to adhere to the exit procedures, and requested that they join him individually. The inquiry began with the priestess, who conveyed that there were no significant issues to report. The captain of the guards inquired whether she believed the barbarian could remain within the territory. The guard captain pondered silently, feeling uncertain about the choice to allow the barbarian to remain. He realized that any uncertainty only became apparent in conversations about him. Ultimately, he determined that conquering the dungeon had merely been a step in a larger plan, with the true aim being to reveal those who posed a threat. Amidst inquiry, he observes that does not appear to be the sort who would stir up any trouble. Observed that the barbarian possessed immense strength, yet had not inflicted harm on anyone. This led him to conclude that the barbarian was entirely unlike the typical ones he had encountered. During the questioning, spoke highly of his team. He expressed admiration for skillful disarming of traps and his attempts to open the chest. He also acknowledged bravery in maintaining the as a warrior, mentioned that his own prayers had offered support to the group during their battle. The captain observed the unexpected exchange of compliments with curiosity, recognizing that it was uncommon for strangers who were compelled to collaborate to speak so highly of one another. The captain reached a decision and allowed them to enter, cautioning them that any misbehavior would result in their expulsion. After successfully clearing the dungeon, he handed over the reward to the group, instructing them to share it amongst themselves. This act garnered admiration, as he observed that it was not uncommon for guards to keep such rewards for themselves. Expressed with cheer that the reward ought to be shared equitably among everyone. The other members appeared perplexed and declined their portions, expressing that they were content without it. Was adamant that the dungeon conquest had been a team effort, insisting that the reward needed to be distributed equitably, and he was unwilling to entertain any protests. With a burst of excitement, he proposed that they should commemorate the occasion by heading to a nearby tavern for some drinks. The team, despite their outward agreement, was filled with fear and secretly yearned to return home unharmed. Upon entering the territory, the captain's mind turned to the report he would soon write, particularly noting how a barbarian had astonishingly defeated a skeletal knight with just one powerful strike. He determined that was far from an ordinary barbarian, possessing immense strength comparable to that of a knight, making him an extraordinary and legendary figure. The captain instructed a subordinate to keep watch over the gate as he went to deliver his report to the Lord. The captain stepped into the throne room, preparing to present his report. Barkin, the Lord presiding over the Barkin territory, inquired about the situation. The captain relayed the news about a barbarian having shown up within the territory. When the Lord inquired about whether permission had been granted for the man's entry, the captain affirmed that he had allowed it, rationalizing that he perceived no significant issue with the man's presence. The Lord inquired about the nature of the issue. The captain conveyed that the issue lay in the barbarian's immense strength, which could potentially become a significant challenge. The Lord inquires about the extent of his strength. The captain recounted an impressive feat to him, revealing that he had vanquished a skeletal knight with just one powerful strike. The Lord reiterated the details, observing that vanquishing a creature of that magnitude demanded the prowess of at least a knight. He pondered the idea that barbarians were simplistic and unlearned individuals, who resorted to sheer physical strength to address every problem. He determined that was at least a first rank, and the captain agreed that this was the most plausible explanation, though he did not dismiss the chance that might possess even greater strength. The Lord contemplated the potential challenges posed by a warrior of such formidable strength, a barbarian who lived by the creed that strength determined justice. Recognizing the potential for trouble, he decided to have the warrior brought before him. He conveyed that simply having someone of such immense power roaming the area posed a significant threat, and despite the inherent risks, he preferred to confront him personally. The captain voiced his worries about the Lord's safety, but the Lord confidently assured him that he could handle things himself during the night. A massive knight clad in armor emerged from behind the throne, leaving the captain in a state of shock. Lord turned to his knight, seeking his perspective on the matter. The knight responded with assuredness, pointing out that while might possess great strength, he remained nothing more than an uninformed savage. The knight believed would be easily defeated by his expert swordsmanship, which he had mastered under the tutelage of a renowned. The Lord made up his mind to personally address the barbarian and instructed his men to call for him. At the same time, was enjoying a celebration with his team in a lively tavern. The rest of the team appeared utterly worn out by insatiable hunger and thirst. Remarked on the tastiness of the food and the tranquility of the venue, assuring them they could order anything they desired, as it would be charged to his account. Turning to, he checks to confirm that is indeed a paladin. The man inquired about the type of holy power the other possessed, curious as to why none had been displayed in the dungeon. With a hint of nervousness, confessed that he was still in the midst of his training, and his divine abilities had yet to manifest. Remarked with a hint of regret about the situation. He then turned his attention to the priestess, inquiring whether there was a temple for her deity somewhere close by. Expressed her belief that it was unlikely, as she felt her deity was not broadly accepted. The narrative reveals that holds the title of the god associated with lies and deception. This deity is shunned and dismissed by the majority of the people. Inquired about the true extent of strength. Expressed his uncertainty about his rank, explaining that he had just recently departed from the snowfield. In return, he inquired about the power of the skeletal knight. Hayes elaborates that encountering a skeletal knight requires a minimum of second-rank ability. However, accomplishing the feat of vanquishing it with a single strike, as managed, demands the prowess of a first-rank warrior. Assessed the situation and determined that his abilities were classified as second rank. Just then, the tavern owner, clearly in a state of panic, burst into the scene. He hurriedly informed them that the establishment was on the verge of closing, his fear evident due to the looming threat of the barbarians nearby. Expressed her regret and requested that everyone exit the room. When he inquired about their other plans, they all hastily insisted, with a hint of panic, that their schedules were incredibly packed. Conveyed his regret and wished them goodbye, holding on to the hope of meeting them once more in the future. The group unanimously wished never to encounter him again. Later found herself lying in a bed at an inn, taking a moment to rest. He appreciated being able to pay for the inn, a possibility made real by the rewards he had earned from the dungeon. He viewed this place as a paradise in contrast to the vast expanse of the snowfield. He reflected on the extensive journey he had undertaken to reach civilization, and felt a strong urge to continue exploring. He made up his mind to embark on an adventure, pondering over possible destinations such as the Elf Sanctuary, the Tower of Magic, and the Royal Capital. A sudden and forceful pounding on the door jolts him awake. The guard captain stood at the door, offering an apology for disturbing him from his rest. The captain conveyed to him that the Lord had expressed a desire for a personal meeting. Found it intriguing that the ruler of this territory desired an audience with him. He agreed with a cheerful disposition. While putting on his uniform, the captain found himself perplexed by how easily he had agreed, questioning whether he had indeed arrived at the correct location. As made his way through the territory, he realized it was the first time he had seen it in daylight. The daytime scene appeared absolutely wonderful to him. He felt a surge of happiness at the thought that if this was the sort of delightful fantasy he was going to experience, he would gladly embrace it at any moment. Meanwhile, the guard accompanying him appeared utterly perplexed. He concluded that he needed to keep preoccupied as much as he could. The captain of the guards informed the Lord about the arrival of the barbarian, prompting the Lord to instruct that the newcomer be brought before him. Made her way into the throne room. Lord Barkin extended a warm welcome to the visitor, as the master of the Barkin territory within the kingdom of. Extended his hand, and with a warm smile, conveyed his delight at finally meeting the true lord of the land. The man announced his identity as the barbarian. The guard stood in disbelief as he witnessed the unexpected sight of a barbarian lowering his head in a bow. The Lord mused that barbarians held strength in the highest regard, believing it to be their sole guiding principle. With a touch of sarcasm, he remarked that living long enough would eventually reveal all sorts of unexpected sights. The Lord noted that had mastered proper etiquette and extended an invitation for him to take a seat. Pondered over the architecture of the Lord's castle. As he surveys the scene, he observes the knight standing vigil beside the Lord, and his thoughts drift to the castles from medieval times, noting the similarities. The sight of a real knight left him in awe, matching the vivid imaginations he had cherished since childhood. The knight was filled with a palpable and intense aura of hostility. The knight regarded Saudacity with disdain, convinced that displaying such an aura before the Lord was foolish. He silently promised himself that would not survive this encounter. The Lord explains to that he has been summoned for a straightforward reason. The Lord seeks to verify some details. Nodded in agreement, then inquired about the confirmation the Lord sought. Upon being questioned by the Lord about his background, responds by mentioning that he hails from the coldest region imaginable, a realm blanketed entirely in white. The young man explained that he had journeyed from the white snowfield, a revelation that startled both the Lord and his knight. The Lord comes to the startling realization that is indeed one of the legendary barbarians, a truth that proves difficult to embrace. Mentioned it was a terrifying place, and it was up to the Lord to decide whether to acknowledge this reality. The Lord shifted the conversation, steering it towards a new query regarding the extent of strength. Rephrased the inquiry, emphasizing that the crucial aspect was the potential danger posed by his strength. He responded by saying it was the incorrect question, as he was unfamiliar with the criteria beyond the snow-covered landscape. The Lord proposed a method to assess his strength, involving a duel with one of the knights, and offered an attractive reward as an incentive. Echoed the term duel, and the Lord assured him that it would not be a fight to the death. Smiled, his excitement palpable at the mere thought of dueling a knight, as he expressed his approval of the idea. His mind buzzed with overwhelming excitement at the prospect of facing not just any knight, but one from a fantastical realm, a warrior wielding enigmatic power and aura. Brimmed with excitement at the thought of the upcoming duel, viewing it as an opportunity to observe a genuine knight's skills firsthand. Lord, on the other hand, held the belief that courteous demeanor masked a different intent. A barbarian stays true to his savage roots, and the wild part of him that takes pleasure in combat remains unaltered. In a vast arena designed for dueling, the two opponents face each other. The Lord proclaimed the commencement of the match, voicing his wish that no blood would be spilled. The knight, with an air of arrogance, suggested to that witnessing his swordsmanship should be regarded as an honor. Expressed his hopefulness with certainty. The knight seemed to bristle with irritation at the serenity displayed by. He committed to demonstrating to him the significant gap in their abilities. The valiant knight initiated his assault with precision and determination. The sword in his hand appeared to replicate, transforming into a trio of identical blades. Found herself taken aback by the unexpected technique. Upon closer inspection, it becomes clear to him that what he sees is not merely a trick of the mind. The observer pondered the authenticity of the three swords, questioning whether this display truly constituted swordsmanship. The knight found himself impressed by skillful maneuver as she narrowly evaded his strike. Despite his admiration, he decided there was no need to pursue the matter further. Effortlessly moved his finger with a graceful flick. The knight watched in bewilderment as the sword splintered into pieces, leaving him puzzled about what had just occurred. Before he had the chance to become aware of it, reached out and took hold of his face. With a single powerful strike, he sent the knight sprawling, leaving him utterly defeated. The Lord stood utterly stunned, coming to terms with the fact that a knight of the highest rank had been vanquished with just one strike. He marveled at the sheer force of his immense strength. Inquired about the conclusion of the match. The Lord, taken aback, affirms the truth of the matter. The Lord contemplated the scenario unfolding before him. He witnessed a barbarian overpowering a first-ranked knight with just one strike. The barbarian's strength was immense, seemingly beyond the natural realm, and the true extent of his abilities remained a mystery. He realized that a barbarian possessing such immense power had the potential to disrupt the world's balance of power. He concluded that the moment had arrived to notify the individual, who was among the select few globally recognized as a. The Lord pondered this impending arrival, curious about whether he would show interest in the situation at hand. In a sudden twist, an elderly man with white hair materialized within the confines of the Lord's chamber. The Lord chuckled, remarking on this consistently peculiar tastes. In response, the noted that a bit of amusement was necessary in life. Cain, the renowned, requested that the Lord share more details about this intriguing subject. Lord greeted Cain warmly, his words conveying the deep honor he felt at receiving such a distinguished visitor on such short notice. In the meantime, the knight who had confronted was recuperating in his bed. The Lord paid him a visit, inquiring about his well-being. The knight expressed his regret and assured everyone that he would recover in just a few days. Sword Master Cain emerged, reprimanding his student for his defeat to an unfamiliar barbarian, insisting that it was he who deserved an apology. Cain looked over his student, observing that the young man appeared to be free of any injuries. Kane observed what appeared to be his student's armor shattered into pieces, and considering the student's dire state, it seemed logical to assume he wouldn't have survived. Yet, to Kane's surprise, the student's body remained unscathed. This led Kane to ponder if the barbarian had intentionally restrained his strength. The Lord concurred, noting that was more than a mere reckless barbarian. He possessed the remarkable ability to wield his power with extraordinary accuracy. Kane realized that his ability to exhibit such restraint indicated that his power was far superior to that of a knight. It suggested that had reached a level that could only be described as supernatural. Kane found himself lost in contemplation. Lord sought a comparison of strength between himself, and desiring to hear an assessment of their abilities. Kane, exuding confidence, expressed that although possessed considerable strength, he himself was a master of the sword, asserting that even supernatural abilities could not touch him. Kane observed that, despite not utilizing aura, wielded an astonishing amount of power. Acknowledging the impossibility of the situation through conventional methods, he speculates whether this might be the power wielded by the barbarians from the White Snowfield. Initially, the Lord had doubted the information, but now it appeared to be true. Kane pondered over the legend of a remarkable human emerging from the vast expanse of the White Snowfield. He pondered whether it was genuinely human or perhaps belonged to another race. He quickly rejects the notion that he belongs to a different race. He rationalized that if he truly were what they claimed, he wouldn't have demonstrated any compassion by allowing the knight to live, ultimately deciding that he must have misunderstood the situation. Kane remained troubled by the fact that had arrived specifically from the White Snowfield, pondering the reasons behind his appearance from such a place at this exact moment. As the Lord inquired about any potential issues he might be facing, Kane brushed off the issue, deciding it was something to address later. He muttered under his breath about the peculiar demands the Emperor frequently imposed. He assured the Lord that at present there was no cause for concern. Kane inquired about the presence of the barbarian within the territory, and the Lord assured him that the barbarian remained there. Kane resolves to verify the situation on his own. Later, the guard captain inquired about the future plans might have envisioned. The captain handed his reward for the duel, explaining that the Lord would no longer meddle in his affairs within the territory. Considered that even though his plans were still in flux, having an officially recognized identity might be beneficial in preventing any potential issues down the road. The captain elaborated on the possible paths to success, suggesting that one could either secure the backing of a powerful sponsor or choose the life of a mercenary. He explained that by accumulating a series of accomplishments as a mercenary and earning acknowledgement from the guild, his identity could gain official recognition. The captain of the guards believed that securing a sponsor would be a more fitting path for someone possessing such formidable strength, as individuals working as low-ranking mercenaries were often relegated to performing menial tasks. Found the allure of becoming a mercenary irresistible, captivated by the prospect of accepting requests and slaying monsters, which she believed embodied the true spirit of fantasy romance. He inquired about the best place to start his journey as a mercenary. The captain responded by mentioning the existence of a guild hall. The young man, filled with eagerness, requests guidance from the captain, who, though puzzled, consents to help. The story depicts mercenaries as individuals often romanticized by some, yet in reality, they stand as the lowest tier of society, belonging to those who lack any official status. Many of the strong adventurers frequently met their end in hidden dungeons, or they found themselves unfairly blamed for unsavory tasks. Upon his arrival at the mercenary guild, he discovers the establishment engulfed in turmoil, the result of an intense and unruly fight. Two mercenaries exchanged a flurry of insults. Spectators placed wagers on the outcome of the battle. In the vicinity, a woman inquired of Rosa, the receptionist, regarding the newly arrived recruits. Rose let out a sigh, reflecting on how everyone around her seemed like a bunch of oddballs and without hope. In her mind, she goes over the list of new recruits, a deranged individual asserting he is a holy knight, a cunning thief, and a nun who lacks trust due to the deity she follows. Rosa expressed her disappointment, noting that no individuals of good standing had arrived. In her heart, she yearned for a dashing prince to appear on a white steed and rescue her from the drudgery of her work. As made her entrance into the guild, The sight of him caught her off guard. Glanced around the area and realized it was the guild hall. The brawl came to an abrupt halt as all eyes turned toward the barbarian, their expressions filled with astonishment. Approaching the reception desk, declares his intention to join the ranks of mercenaries. Rosa, feeling flustered, inquires about the reason behind his actions. Shared his numerous motives, one of which involved the possibility of gaining official status through mercenary work. Rosa acknowledged this was true, yet cautioned him that such recognition would require a proven history of accomplishments. Nodded in agreement, prompting Rosa to register him in exchange for 5 silver coins. She inquired about his name and age. He provided his name but was unsure of his age, so she estimated and recorded an approximate number. Once the registration process was finished, she handed him his mercenary tag, cautioning him about the importance of not misplacing it, as it represented his status. Reaches out and takes hold of the tag. Upon entering, he promptly inquired about the quests available, eager to begin his journey without delay. Rosa presented the list of quests that were available to him. Was taken aback when he discovered that the list included only F-rank quests, which consisted of tasks like collecting herbs, tidying basements, sewers, and streets, as well as conducting night watch patrols. Rosa, feeling anxious, explains that due to his current status as an F-rank mercenary, these are the only tasks he can undertake. She expresses her concern that he might become upset, considering his pride as a barbarian. As she started to explain that he would be able to tackle more challenging tasks once he had built up a work record, cut her off, announcing that he would take on one of the quests himself. He directed attention toward the mission involving the collection of herbs. Rosa felt a wave of surprise wash over her and questioned certainty. In response, assured her that as long as the task required completion, there would be no issue. Inquires about the location of the herbs he needs for his journey. Rosa, the receptionist, informed him that he would need to venture beyond the village, presenting him with an image of the plant he needed to find. Nodded in acknowledgement, assuring that he comprehended the situation and promised a swift return. Rosa, with a hint of reluctance, responded to his assurance. Rosa found herself confused by how calmly and readily he accepted the situation. Amidst the forest's lush greenery, ponders the peculiar appearance of a certain herb, curious if it might serve a purpose in healing wounds. The young man resolved to embark on his inaugural task as a hired soldier. Approximately 1 hour later, made his way back to the mercenary guild. He revealed an enormous mound of herbs, inquiring if this would suffice. Rosa stared in astonishment at the sheer volume before her. As she inspected the herbs, she was taken aback by their remarkable condition, observing that most mercenaries usually gathered them with little care. Confidently expressed pride in his abilities, assuring others that his delicate touch was not to be underestimated, despite what his appearance might suggest. Rosa expressed her gratitude for his diligent efforts and handed him his reward, which was a solitary silver coin. Came to the realization that the sum he held was scarcely sufficient to purchase the most inexpensive meal. Despite this, an overwhelming sense of emotion washed over him, as it marked the first time he had honestly earned money through his own hard work. The amazed Rosa heard him express his satisfaction and his eagerness to undertake another mission right away. Rosa was perplexed, unable to comprehend how he could be content with such a small reward. Expressed his desire to work tirelessly for as long as there were hours left in the day. Rosa found herself curious about the source of his apparent happiness. The young woman realized that the new mercenary shared the same odd characteristics as others she had encountered. As the hours slipped by, decided that the task of cleaning out the warehouse would be his mission for the day. Rosa observed that this mission marked his third cleaning task following his herb-gathering duties. She pondered, puzzled, whether warriors of his kind had a peculiar fondness for cleanliness. With a touch of reluctance, Rosa gave her consent to his request. Made his way to the warehouse, declaring his intention to tidy up the place. The owner of the warehouse felt a surge of panic at the sight of a barbarian. The chore of tidying up the warehouse and shifting the goods proved to be a simple endeavor for him. His subsequent assignment involved sweeping the streets. Initially, he found it challenging to manage his strength, but ultimately he finished the job without any significant problems. Through the lens of a scope, an observer kept a distant watch on him. The observer pondered the reasons behind his peculiar behavior. He knew that possessed supernatural strength, a force potent enough to influence the fate of an entire kingdom. The observer remained puzzled, watching as the barbarian, known for relying on brute strength to solve problems, himself with mundane tasks. The oddity lay in the fact that he approached these tasks with earnest dedication, rather than with indifference. The observer stood utterly perplexed, while experienced a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment from his straightforward task. Later collected his earnings. Rosa explained that this was his reward for successfully finishing 15 missions. The amount is equivalent to 15 silver coins. Expressed his gratitude, and mentioned that he planned to return the following day to begin his second day in the world of civilization. As strolled through the bustling city, she took pleasure in observing the vibrant scenes of everyday life unfolding around her. As he gazed around, his eyes landed on a structure that revealed itself to be a library. Upon his entrance, the librarian becomes visibly flustered. He inquired whether she would be bothered by him reading a few books. The situation only serves to heighten her sense of fear. Settled into a comfortable position and started reading in a soft, almost inaudible voice. He observed him with a puzzled expression, contemplating whether the snowfield barbarians might be more refined than other tribes. Stumbled upon a history book, where she learned that the empire had emerged victorious in the war. He recalled the visit made a few years prior, during which she was en route to sell weapons to the kingdom that had suffered defeat in the war. As he perused the text, it became clear to him that the empire had risen to a position of dominance, effectively reducing the kingdom of Barkin, his current location, to the status of a vassal state. The book elaborates on how the empire has already consumed half of the human world, and persists in its relentless quest for expansion. Contemplated the notion of conquering the world. He concluded that he had spent enough time on human matters and shifted his focus to the subject that truly intrigued him, the study of non-human races. He came across a book filled with details about non-humans, and as he skimmed through its pages, he understood that the fantastical tales within were, in fact, the realities of this world. Delved deeper into his book, uncovering information about Manta, the intricate tunnels carved by the dwarves, and the most bountiful caves on the planet. The boy delves into tales of the enchanted village known as and the city inhabited by the Celestials, called. He then learns about the revered sanctuary for all elves, a place shrouded in mystery as its whereabouts remain unknown to everyone. Believed that the insights he received from the Elf Queen had equipped him with the necessary knowledge to finally gain entry into the sanctuary. Upon discovering the existence of other places resembling the white snowfield, he felt a wave of surprise wash over him. The book discusses realms inhabited by demonic entities, areas that are inhospitable to humans and populated by grotesque and misshapen creatures. It notes that there are 5 such realms, each remarkably expansive. The 5 realms collectively formed what was known as the Silent Forest. The chasm loomed before them, vast and enigmatic. In the depths of the ocean, a chasm with no visible end. The untouched expanse of a white snowfield stretched out before them. The book described the existence of fearsome entities known as the Others, beings confined to their own realms and unable to breach the boundary into the human world. Was in awe of the sheer expanse of this realm, finding the snowfield's enormity particularly astonishing. Having concluded that there was nothing more to gain from his current surroundings, he made up his mind to depart. The young man expressed his gratitude to the petrified librarian, who managed to respond with a shaky voice. Later in the day, made his way back to the mercenary guild, seeking out Rosa to inquire about the missions available for that day. Rosa extended her hand, offering him the list of quests. While observing for the second consecutive day, Kane reached the conclusion that was indeed peculiar. Intrigued by this strangeness, Kane resolved to arrange a personal meeting with him. That evening moved with a joyful step, having successfully finished a dozen missions. He believed that the minor tasks were piling up, and at this pace, he felt confident that the day he would be acknowledged as a genuine mercenary was approaching swiftly. He abruptly senses a presence trailing behind him and halts in his tracks. Facing the mysterious figure concealed beneath a hood, he realized it was Kane. Kane stood frozen in surprise, unable to believe that had actually noticed him. Meanwhile, turned to address the individual who had been trailing him throughout the entire day, inquiring about their intentions. Cain pondered the mystery of how had managed to notice him. The surprise was evident on his face, as he had shielded himself with an aura that should have gone undetected, even by those with the keenest perception. Upon noticing the hooded figure's silence, immediately suspects a thief and readies himself for combat. This action leaves Cain feeling perplexed. Believes that thieves can be found even in the most secure locations. Cain felt a surge of panic as he worried that would not believe him if he claimed to be a. Considered the thief an excellent chance to enhance his mercenary record with a notable accomplishment. Cain found himself confused by the mix-up. Recognizing the potential in the misunderstanding, he saw this encounter as a valuable chance. With mistaking him for a thief, he could leverage the confrontation to uncover insights about his real power and identity. The moment marked the beginning of the confrontation between and Cain. Without warning, vanished from Cain's sight. Materialized suddenly behind Cain, leaving him in a state of shock. Cain understood that remaining still would have resulted in seizing him by the neck. Cain summoned a sudden rush of energy, allowing him to swiftly distance himself, prompting to remark on his impressive speed. Cain experienced a jolt of surprise as the realization hit him that he had narrowly escaped being caught. What baffled him further was the absence of any aura emanating from. Was intrigued by the speed at which Cain managed to move, despite possessing only a human body. Cain concluded that the situation had escalated beyond a mere test, and resolved to unleash the entirety of his power. Cain lunged forward with an aggressive strike, but swiftly evaded his attempt with ease. Cain found himself engulfed in surprise once more, unable to respond despite having heightened his awareness. Seized Cain's arm, and he experienced a powerful sensation, as though his entire body was being yanked with great strength. Despite the agony coursing through their body, they found themselves overpowered, unable to rival his formidable strength. Cain made the decision to unleash the entirety of his strength. Cain's body became enveloped in a glow of green mana, catching off guard. The powerful energy urged him to step back, while Cain observed the radiant force within his grasp. Remained convinced that Cain was a thief, remarking on how modern-day thieves seem to have a wide array of techniques. Cain, growing frustrated, urged him to cease this foolishness. Cain internally mused over his confusion, noting how she was mistakenly identifying the rare skill of manifested mana, a feat achievable only by the most skilled individuals, as merely a thief's trick. He determined that sincerely held this belief. Cain pondered the formidable power of manifested mana, realizing that it had the capability to slice through solid steel. A human body would typically be ripped to shreds upon contact, yet emerged without even a minor wound. Cain was amazed by his capacity to endure the impact with nothing but his bare body. Meanwhile, observed that Cain was employing something intriguing. In a decisive moment, Cain resolved to bring the situation to a close by unsheathing his sword. Intervenes just in time, using his finger to halt the action before anything can be drawn. Cain exerted all his strength in an attempt to wrench the sword away from his firm grip. He found himself unable to proceed, a wave of shock and desperation washing over him as he realized this marked the end of his journey. Gazed at the subdued Cain, contemplating that such was the nature of thieves in this fantastical realm. The guard captain appeared on the scene, utterly perplexed, questioning the events unfolding and the reason for Cain's presence. Upon witnessing the situation, he immediately concludes that the barbarian must have launched an assault on the. Informed him that he had successfully apprehended the thief. With the vanquished Cain in hand, he pondered whether handing the subdued individual over to the guards would qualify as valuable experience for a burgeoning mercenary. The guard captain observed the unfolding scene with shock, unable to comprehend how Cain, a figure who had achieved the esteemed rank of transcendent, could be captured in such a degrading manner by the barbarian. The captain attempts to clarify that Cain is not a thief, but assumes that they are familiar with each other. In the kingdom of the guard respectfully acknowledged Cain, who held the unique title of the soul in the realm. Puzzled, wonders aloud whether this thief truly possesses such a prestigious title. The man adamantly claims that Cain is a robber who assaulted him in an attempt to steal his silver coins. The captain confidently declared that the individual in question was indeed certain he could not be wrong about the identity. In response, questioned whether the captain believed the man to be a magician employing a disguise spell. The captain noted that any magician capable of such feats would earn a level of respect equal to that of a. This remark led to ponder whether the term might simply be another way to refer to thieves. The captain reasserts with confidence that Cain is indeed the. The captain concluded that reporting the situation to the Lord was necessary. The Lord stood in disbelief, grappling with the possibility that Master Cain might have faced defeat. Later on, was consumed by regret, as he realized that he should have taken the time to hear the entire story. Cain acknowledged his responsibility, confessing that the fault lay with him for his silence. The two remained seated in an air filled with shared remorse. In a state of disbelief, the Lord pondered how it was possible for Cain to have been vanquished by the barbarian. The conclusion reached by him is that the barbarian possesses greater strength than the. Observing the circumstances carefully, he recognizes that despite the existence of various tiers among the transcendent beings, with Cain possibly occupying the very bottom position, the notion of a being vanquished by a mere barbarian seems utterly implausible. The statement implied that was a force beyond anyone's control. The Lord, feeling weary from the situation, chooses to step back, allowing the two individuals to converse and resolve their misunderstanding. He departs, allowing them to converse softly amongst themselves. Cain contemplated his utter loss, overwhelmed with feelings of humiliation and fatigue. The man announced himself with formality as Cain, renowned for his mastery of the sword. When Kettle inquired about whether was a family name, Cain clarified that upon attaining such a rank, conventional human titles became insignificant. Comprehends the situation, and inquires whether the method employed was that of a. Cain's presence emanates a powerful aura. Found himself genuinely impressed, realizing that the technique, now revealed to be that of a, was truly remarkable in his eyes. Cain elaborated that what they were witnessing was the physical embodiment of mysticism, commonly referred to as aura. Came to the understanding that the green energy he had noticed earlier was actually aura. He expressed an intense curiosity about the method of its usage. Cain elaborated that mysticism required careful control and deliberate manifestation. Inquired whether mysticism bore any resemblance to mana. Cain explained that mysticism was the enigmatic energy itself. When harnessed as mana, it transformed a person into a magician, whereas managing it as aura defined one as a swordsman. Upon realizing that both mages and swordsmen harness the power of mysticism, feeling a bit embarrassed, confesses his lack of expertise. He then requests Cain to instruct him in his methods. Cain was met with persistent requests from him, urging Cain to become his mentor. Cain felt a jolt of surprise at the request, pondering why guidance was being sought from him when the other person seemed to be the stronger of the two. Thought that if Cain had wielded his sword during their battle, the result could have been altered. Eagerly conveys his enthusiasm for gaining new knowledge, whereas Cain harbors concerns about his self-esteem, fearing it might suffer even more damage. Reflects on the basic swordsmanship skills he acquired in his previous life. The artistry of this technique stood unparalleled. It embodied the essence of true fantasy swordsmanship, wielding a mysterious aura with every movement. Cain commenced his explanation, describing how the core principle of his swordsmanship was the fusion of illusion and reality. He then inquired about his observations during the battle with his student. Came to the realization that the knight he had bested was actually a student of Cain. He then went on to explain how his swordplay was so precise that a single strike seemed to divide into 3 genuine attacks. Realizes this is what it means to embody a concept fully. Cain elaborates, mentioning that his approach emphasizes technique over sheer force. He explained that swordsmanship involves merging the sword with one's aura to harness mystical powers, and those who master this path are known as sword masters. Was captivated by the aura surrounding them, whereas Cain remained incredulous at the thought of instructing someone he considered a barbarian. Cain opts to demonstrate his point directly, choosing action over words. Cain showcased his skill by executing a forceful swing of his sword. Notices that what initially seemed like one sword strike has now into 5 distinct strikes. Cain elaborates on how various techniques rely on aura to craft illusions, but it is his unique style that brings those illusions into reality. Upon being asked about his opinion on the skill, responded with confidence, expressing his belief that he, too, was capable of mastering it. Kane was taken aback, dismissing the other person's words as sheer nonsense. Kane reflected on his life's journey, believing wholeheartedly that he had devoted every moment to achieving his current level of skill. He found it unimaginable that could replicate such a feat merely by observing it once. Decides that demonstrating would be quicker and promptly reaches for an axe. With a determined stance, he launched into an attack, swinging the axe with incredible speed. Initially, Kane perceives the swift motions as merely relying on sheer strength. The assault results in 5 distinct imprints on the wall, perfectly replicating the impact of Kane's method. From his axe, wisps of smoke curled into the air. He then sought Kane's opinion on the matter. Kane recognized internally that the phenomenon resembled his own technique, though it relied solely on extraordinary speed and strength to achieve. Kane contended that its actions were merely a quick, unrefined swing, lacking any real technique, and emphasized that genuine swordsmanship was meant for real battle situations. Responds by questioning whether achieving the same outcome isn't sufficient. Kane felt a surge of frustration, acknowledging deep down that was indeed correct. In a surge of frustration, he seized his sword and issued another challenge too. Kane activated his ultimate ability with a fierce determination. Found himself questioning whether his body had been torn apart by the powerful strike. Kane elaborates on the technique known as body separation, accomplished by mastering the control of aura to its highest potential. In a bold move, he dares to replicate the technique. Launched an attack of his own in response. He wielded his axe with a furious intensity, creating a whirlwind of sheer physical power. Kane's technique was completely overshadowed. After unleashed a devastating attack that demolished the arena, he turned to Kane, seeking his thoughts on the matter. Kane fell to his knees, overwhelmed by an unbearable sense of hopelessness. The young man was overwhelmed with despair, tears streaming down his face as he lamented the futility of his swordsmanship and the life he had painstakingly constructed, now rendered meaningless. He considered the situation beyond belief, realizes that Kane's mental state is more delicate than he had initially perceived. Walked over to where Kane lay defeated, acknowledging the skill Kane had shown with his sword. He humbly dismissed his own prowess, attributing his victory to merely swinging his axe quickly, insisting that it wasn't true swordsmanship. Kane came to the understanding that spoke the truth. He acknowledged that technique held genuine substance, far beyond a mere illusion. He accepted with a sense of resignation that he could never attain such a level of mystical prowess. Kane steadied himself, reassuring his mind that his skills with the sword remained invaluable, as he alone possessed the unique ability to blend illusion with reality. He eagerly asserted that his skills with a sword were perfect, while dismissing the barbarian as nothing more than a madman. He exclaimed that achieving the speed necessary to form a true illusion without the use of aura surpassed human capabilities. Upon witnessing the emotional outburst, expressed a desire to learn the true essence of technique from Kane. Kane, feeling a bit embarrassed, offered an apology for his earlier display of emotions, to which responded with understanding and empathy. Kane commenced his lesson by detailing that mastering a genuine technique required an initial ability to control one's aura. However, achieving such control first demanded a comprehension of mysticism. He elaborates on the idea that achieving a high level is impossible for any mage, swordsman, or sorcerer without a grasp of mysticism, suggesting that only those with faith in deities can circumvent this requirement. Wondered aloud whether divine power existed as something distinct from other forms of power. Kane affirmed this by explaining that miracles are bestowed directly by the gods and are not linked to individual talents. Conveyed his understanding. Kane described mysticism as the enigmatic force that resided within an individual, explaining that the way it was wielded was what ultimately shaped everything. He elaborates that in order to harness aura, gain mana, or command spirits, a person must initially comprehend this mystical knowledge. He explained that mysticism unfolds in 5 distinct stages. The most basic stage involves unveiling the mystery, where an individual reaches a state of understanding, perception, and awareness. Kettle inquired if anyone could sense it, to which Kane responded negatively, clarifying that without a gift, a person wouldn't be able to perceive it at all. He mentioned that individuals capable of perceiving it were referred to as third rank. He described how individuals received one of 5 levels, each determined by their capacity to manage mystical powers. He enumerated the 5 general classifications: third rank, second rank, first rank, transcendent, and hero. Had a sudden flash of memory, recalling his discussion with, and realizing that this was exactly what she had meant. Kane elaborates on how the ranking system serves merely as a tool for convenience, emphasizing that the disparity between each level is vast. Nodded to show he understood, while Kane declared that the lesson was about to begin. Kane announced that the initial phase involved revealing the enigma. He urged to push his senses to their absolute boundaries in order to perceive the enigma, clarifying that this entailed activating sensations he had never experienced previously. He urged him to sense the breeze, the texture of the ground, and the changing winds to identify the distinct motions within them. Pondered deeply, attempting to adhere to the given directions. Despite opening his eyes, he expressed an absence of any sensation. Kane was taken aback, confessing his assumption that someone with strength would be able to sense it effortlessly. He elaborates on the notion that individuals with greater physical strength generally possess an enhanced ability to perceive the mystery. However, he speculates that could potentially be an exception to this general rule. He pondered whether the unusual nature of the white snowfield was the cause. Responded with uncertainty, admitting that he was unaware of anyone he knew in the snowfield ever experiencing the enigma before. Kane opts for a different approach, channeling energy straight to lead him. Inquired about the possibility of aura being transferred to him. Kane acknowledges the similarity and encourages him to get ready. Kane gently rested his hand on shoulder, guiding him to calm his body and concentrate his awareness deep within, encouraging him to sense the energy coursing through him. Kane stood in disbelief, his mind racing with questions about the nature of the body before him, uncertain if it could truly belong to a human. He perceives physique as resembling solid rock, a result of the impressive density of his muscles. Observed Kane's momentary pause, and sensing his reluctance, Kane quickly expressed his regret and assured her that he would start right away. Kane initiated the transfer of aura, driven by the conviction that awakening the hidden mystery was of utmost importance. He experienced another shock as he realized the elusive path within his body remained undiscovered. He quickly amends his statement, admitting that it is out of his reach. He likens the experience to plunging into an endless ocean, where his energy feels as though it connects with nothing, or akin to navigating a realm of immense heaviness. Kane announced with a hint of resignation that their efforts were in vain. Her voice, tinged with concern, questioned whether this implied that he was devoid of talent. Kane explained that his intention was misunderstood. Ultimately, he believed that each individual needed to discover their own path. Asserted his awareness of the situation, but Kane delivered the shocking revelation that he had been unable to locate that path within his body. Was taken aback, wondering if this meant he was completely unable to perceive the mystery. Kane, however, refuted this notion, clarifying that he hadn't even been able to verify the existence of the path. He clarifies that physique is unusual, describing it as so dense and profound that the aura struggles to penetrate its interior fully. Kane realized it was the first occasion he had witnessed such an event, where sheer physical power rendered aura ineffective. Felt a wave of frustration wash over him as he pondered the possibility that even a might be unable to assist him. Meanwhile, Kane confessed his uncertainty, acknowledging the difficulty in providing a definite answer since he hadn't been able to verify anything. He realized that he couldn't determine whether the enigmatic path was present within. He then considered the option of seeking out others who possessed greater expertise in controlling aura, or perhaps exploring the Tower of Magic in search of answers. Kane expressed his regret too, reassures that the current situation is acceptable, acknowledging that there remains a chance for further learning in the future. He expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that he had gained a significant amount of knowledge from their meeting. Kane observed that every barbarian he had encountered up until now had been untamed, relentlessly pillaging, and driven by a thirst for alcohol and aggression. However, this particular barbarian stood apart in contrast. Kane inquired of whether the thought of establishing a life in this kingdom had ever crossed his mind. Questioned the meaning behind the words, prompting Cain to clarify that he was referring to pledging allegiance to the kingdom in exchange for a noble title. Cain mentioned that, given some impressive strength, he would likely attain a high rank and Cain was willing to be his sponsor. Promptly declined, expressing his desire to remain unburdened by any commitments. Cain harbored a secret hope that by escorting the barbarian to the royal palace, there might be a chance to liberate themselves from the empire's oppressive control. Cain made another attempt to convince him, pondering whether the allure of acquiring a noble title was insufficient. Expressed his intention to indulge in his own delights. Cain comprehends the choice he made and embraces it willingly. Expressed his gratitude once more and vowed to remember the favor bestowed upon him. As Cain made his way in the opposite direction, his mind lingered on the absurd notion he had entertained. For a brief moment, he entertained the notion that he might be able to exert some influence over. However, it quickly became clear to him that was beyond anyone's control. This fierce warrior operated solely on his own impulses and beliefs. He determined that could potentially be more challenging than other barbarians due to his unpredictable nature. Later on, Cain engaged in a conversation with Lord about the situation. With a sigh, Cain pondered over the emperor's intentions and questioned why he harbored an ambition to seize control of the demonic territories. The Lord comes to understand that the emperor has a strong desire for this conquest. The man questioned the emperor's sincerity, observing that scouts were losing their lives unnecessarily, all in the name of reconnaissance. Cain affirmed his earnestness, pondering the possibility that the emperor might suspect him of being the reincarnation of the ancient ruler. According to the Lord, this issue pertains to times yet to come, as they have not succeeded in subjugating all the territories inhabited by humans. The Lord determined that an invasion was inevitable in the future. Cain nodded in agreement, explaining that a call to duty might arrive at any moment since their region was also part of the imperial territory. Cain muses over the oddities of the world, noting that even the emperor seems to have lost his grip on sanity. The Lord ponders over the possibility that certain rumors might hold some truth. Cain acknowledged the truth of the rumors, announcing that the demons had started their advance. He elaborates on the situation, mentioning that while no official confirmation exists, the frequency of dungeon appearances has become unusual. Additionally, whispers circulate about the possibility that disturbances from the demonic realm have started to seep into the outside world. He realizes that events are unfolding, and they certainly don't benefit humanity. Cain remarked on the possibility that the most peculiar occurrence had already arrived, alluding to. The Lord concurred with his observation. When Cain seeks the Lord's opinion, the Lord responds with uncertainty, admitting he has no knowledge of the matter. Lord completed his final evaluation of, informing Cain that, at the very least, did not exhibit any hostility towards them. However, Lord admitted that he could not be sure about anything beyond that observation. The following day, wandered through the bustling streets of the city. Upon his arrival, it becomes evident that fear and panic ripple through the crowd at the sight of him. He speculates that the fearful reactions from people might be due to his choice of clothing. Was thoroughly confused about the situation. He mistakenly believed that the issue stemmed from his attire, which was crafted from animal hide and deemed uncivilized by others. He eagerly made up his mind to purchase some sophisticated attire. He stepped into a clothing store. The shop owner felt a surge of fear wash over them at the sight of the individual. Entered the shop with the intention of buying clothes. The shop owner, however, expressed his regret, explaining that there were no clothes available in size. Despite this, he offered an alternative, proposing to create a custom outfit specifically for if he could allow some time for its completion. Felt a surge of satisfaction upon learning about the possibility, and readily accepted the custom order. The shop owner assured him that a call would be made once the task was completed. The shop owner trembled at the thought of potential fury if the outfit displeased him, anxiously questioning his own survival through this encounter. As made his way towards the guild hall, his eyes fell upon a small blue gem that emitted a faint glow on the ground. He picked up the object and scrutinized it closely, observing the strange luminescence it emitted. He made up his mind to inquire about it upon reaching the guild hall. Upon reaching the location, he inquired of Rosa whether she recognized the nature of the gem. On his way to the location, he discovered it and shared this information with others. He observed that the object appeared quite unusual for a bead, prompting Rosa to decide to examine it further. She studied the object closely, observing that it neither resembled a typical gem nor appeared to be naturally formed, suggesting it had been polished or crafted by hand. She observed that the item lacked a name, but appeared to be of significant worth. As she studied the object, a sudden flash of light enveloped her, drawing her into a hypnotic trance. Snapped his fingers to catch her attention, and inquired about her well-being. Rosa awoke in a state of confusion, her mind swirling with uncertainty. Observed her with a knowing look, suggesting that her thoughts appeared to have been irresistibly attracted to the gem, but he quickly brushed off the incident as insignificant. Rosa sensed an unusual energy emanating from the gem, making it hard for her to determine its nature. She proposed that it should be evaluated by an expert. Courteously turned down the offer, expressing his preference to discover the answer on his own, as he believed that was part of the enjoyment. He shifted the conversation and inquired about the quests scheduled for today. Rosa extended the quest list to him, which was brimming with straightforward tasks. Picked up the board to examine the available quests. After another productive day, took a moment to rest, a sense of satisfaction washing over him as he reflected on his achievements. Once more he turned his attention to the enigmatic gem, pondering over its real purpose and characteristics. As he did so, memories of the impact it had on Rosa resurfaced in his mind. A sudden voice emerged from the enigmatic bead, urging him to approach. A voice reverberated in his mind, leading him to question whether it was suggesting he should travel to a particular place. He found it quite entertaining that the bead was projecting a map inside his mind. It led him to ponder whether this peculiar phenomenon was a type of mind control magic. After a brief period of contemplation, he resolves to proceed. On his journey, he mentally urged the persistent voice to hush, promising it that he was on his way. With the mental map guiding him, he navigated to a shadowy, concealed spot, contemplating whether he had arrived at the correct destination. Before his eyes, an enchanted gateway materialized. Stepped into the room and proclaimed his presence, inquiring about the person who summoned him. A menacing voice observed the arrival of yet another sacrifice, remarking that this time, a foolish barbarian would serve as an excellent offering. In the dim and shadowy chamber, an eternal sorcerer known as announced the commencement of his resurrection ritual. The story unfolds, recounting the tale of long ago, during an era marked by turmoil and disorder, a malevolent sorcerer emerged. This dark figure wielded significant influence, bending the will of monarchs and sparking conflicts across the lands. The villain's malicious actions ultimately resulted in his downfall and unmasking by the heroes. Just before his inevitable defeat, he managed to shift his soul into a phylactery, thereby transforming into It is described as a creature that attains eternal life by placing its soul within a vessel that sustains its existence. The nefarious sorcerer transformed himself into devising a plan for his return to life. In order to achieve his resurrection, he required an abundant supply of souls to serve as sacrifices. Therefore, he chose a secluded area to reside in and distributed magical beads to attract victims individually. In what he believed to be a cleverly devised scheme, he felt confident that everything was unfolding smoothly. However, confusion settled over him when he noticed a barbarian in the vicinity. He had intentionally selected such an isolated region to keep his activities hidden from prying eyes. His presence seemed out of the ordinary to him. He determined that imposing stature would make him an ideal offering. He revealed the nature of his cunning trap. He had cast an enchantment on the beads, ensuring they would lure only those who were unfamiliar with the arcane arts. Believing to be nothing more than a typical barbarian lacking any understanding of mysticism, he concluded that apparent immunity to the magic was merely a deceptive appearance. He turned his attention to, proposing that he become the foundation of his magnificent revival. Approached the enormous, foreboding doors as the scene transitioned back to her. As he stepped inside, he discovered the perched regally upon a throne. Felt a surge of joy as he recognized the figure before him as a genuine, one of the iconic antagonists from the realms of fantasy. He found himself taken aback, wondering aloud how remained untouched by the bead's enchantment. Upon witnessing the scattered remains of previous victims, realizes the sinister method of ensnaring unsuspecting individuals. The found himself perplexed, unable to detect any traces of mysticism emanating from. After a moment of contemplation, he determined that must simply be an ordinary barbarian. He speculates that is likely equipped with a top-notch mental defense artifact. However, insists that he possesses nothing of the sort. The expressed disbelief, suggesting that if the magic had truly influenced him, he would have moved along quietly without causing any disturbance. The resolve that he would need to overpower through sheer force, so he called forth his army of skeleton minions. Comes to the realization that he finds himself in a dungeon, the secret lair of a wicked, and comprehends the overall circumstances. With a forceful strike, he broke the skeleton into pieces. He observed that it was not as strong as he had anticipated. He became furious and menaced the person with threats of dismemberment, calling forth additional skeletons to his aid. He commanded his minions to ensure his demise. In an instant, lunged at them with swift precision. Effortlessly, she obliterated them all. He was taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. Reassured himself of the truth in its guidance, recognizing that a skeleton would perish once its head was obliterated. He felt let down because he had anticipated that the would command more formidable death knights, rather than just ordinary skeletons. With a surge of anger, he began to ready a more formidable assault. He announced his intention to unleash his full potential. With a surge of energy, he conjures a fresh servant to his side. In the dimly lit chamber, a skeletal knight clad in full armor emerged, causing to gaze in astonishment at the unexpected sight of another skeletal warrior in the vicinity. He pondered the intriguing possibility that the skeletal knight crafted by them might have unique settings. He commanded the knight to launch an attack, braced himself to confront the skeletal knight conjured by the. With a swift maneuver, he intercepted the knight's assault using his arm, then retaliated with a powerful strike that splintered both the knight's armor and shield. Observed that the evening seemed remarkably robust. He commanded his knight to unleash all of its stored mana. The knight was enveloped in a potent and energetic aura. The entity released the entirety of its formidable strength. Was struck by the attack. The skeletal knight fashioned by the struck him as rather peculiar. With one decisive strike, he utterly demolished it. Crushed the remnants beneath her foot, casting a glance of disappointment and wondering aloud if that was everything it had to offer. The utterly astonished, found himself questioning the nature of what stood before him. As stepped back, the perceived his movement as a sign of fear, and advised him to embrace that terror. The individual warned that a heavy cost awaited anyone who dared to intrude upon his sacred haven. Bewildered by the situation, explains that his presence is a direct result of the gem's call. He questions the, wondering aloud if it wasn't the himself who was responsible for distributing the gems initially. He is left speechless and visibly stunned by this revelation. He came to a harsh realization. The gems he had deliberately scattered had enticed everyone who ventured into the area, including the Barbarian. The now known by his full name, he expressed his frustration towards, demanding silence. He proudly recounted his illustrious history as a formidable sorcerer who had once annihilated 5 kingdoms and bravely confronted numerous heroes. Pondered the length of this name, drawing a mental comparison to the equally lengthy name of the Elf Queen. He mused over whether having such elaborate names was a fashionable trend in this realm. He disregarded the words and commanded him to serve as the foundation for his revival. He summoned an immensely potent spell. Identifies it as an enchantment designed to influence human feelings. The spell, crafted uniquely functioned by drawing out negative emotions and imprisoning the victim within them, ultimately causing their mind to fracture. He exuded confidence, firmly convinced that a barbarian lacking the ability to wield mysticism would stand utterly powerless when faced with genuine magic. He found himself perplexed about how to handle, observing that appeared different and was not adorned with any potent artifacts. The decision was made to capture the individual for further study, and he commanded his skeletal minions to haul him off. The skeletons advanced towards, who appeared to be defenseless. Effortlessly, he broke them apart. He found himself taken aback. He was baffled by the failure of his mind control spell, which, by all accounts, should have been flawless in its execution. Sarcastically inquired whether the had finished merely observing, and then attempted to employ the same skeleton strategy once more. The became furious when he referred to his methods as dull. The believed that humans, even those who had transcended ordinary limits, could not withstand the influence of emotion magic. Taunts the, questioning his inability to wield more straightforward spells such as a fireball, a remark which the perceives as offensive. The started to utter incantations for a spell that was more potent than before. In a reckless surge of power, he releases an enormous wave of dark magic, designed to engulf the world and hurl it into utter chaos. His eyes gleamed with enthusiasm as he observed the breathtaking magical performance unfold before him. The commanded that be consumed. The force of the assault envelops entirely. The let out a triumphant laugh, proclaiming his victory. However, his glee was abruptly interrupted as he began to cough. After expending all his magical energy, he fell to the ground, certain that his last spell had achieved its purpose. As the dust settled, appeared with an air of admiration, noting the impressive nature of the attack. The stood there, utterly stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Stood in front of him, appearing completely unscathed, and inquired with a hint of challenge whether that was all he had to offer. There was in disbelief, as the latest assault proved ineffective. He believed that he had cast his most formidable mind control spell, one potent enough to break the will of a legendary hero. In a moment of despair, he questioned the nature of what he faced, wondering aloud about the placement of components. Responded, noting that despite the attack's flashy appearance, it lacked any significant impact on him. Informs that if this is the extent of his abilities, it is now's opportunity to act. The stood in disbelief, as the realization dawned on him that had arrived fully aware of who he truly was. The erupted into a laugh, convinced that must be an operative from the Empire. He marveled at the cunning of their intelligence network for managing to locate him with such impressive speed. He made a solemn promise to himself that he would rise to power once more and reign over the world again. The suspected that originated from the human farm he had heard rumors about within the Empire, a facility dedicated to cultivating unique abilities. He came to the realization that the individual was a skilled assassin, specifically trained with the purpose of ending his life. Even with the odds stacked against him, he defiantly shouted his intent to destroy and topple the Empire. Stood in utter confusion, questioning whether the had lost his mind. In a last-ditch effort, the conjured a spell while yelling fiercely, insisting on possessing Spotty. He attempted to take control of, by infiltrating his thoughts. The narrative reveals that this decision would confine him to his current form permanently, unless he were to transform back into a. The proclaimed ownership over Spotty, asserting it was now under his control. Within the confines of his mental landscape, the found itself filled with shock and confusion. He speculates whether this could be the inner realm belonging to the Barbarian. He stood in awe, encountering something entirely unfamiliar. The mere presence in this place was overwhelming, threatening to unravel and distort his very thoughts. The shouted vehemently, denying any connection between the Empire and the current events. In the depths of his thoughts, the structure of his mind starts to crumble. Found himself outside, utterly bewildered by his surroundings. He appeared to be quietly murmuring something before unexpectedly falling to the ground. The feeling of disappointment settled over him. The stark aura had indeed been impressive, yet it offered nothing beyond that, leaving him yearning to witness the magic he had anticipated. He decides that the in this realm lacks significant power. Made the decision to accept the rewards, her attention drawn to the staff that emitted a soft glow. As he grasped the staff, curiosity filled his mind about whether it could aid in spellcasting, and if possessing it might enable him to wield magic. Upon making this discovery, he resolves to conceal it from others. Upon noticing a vase, he speculated whether it might be the vessel containing this essence. He resolved to bring the item to Rosa for her expert evaluation, yet an unsettling sense of incompleteness lingered in his mind. In front of him, he observed an unusual sight resembling a gate. The thought of a concealed chamber lingered in their mind. Upon activating a hidden mechanism within the throne, a voice responded affirmatively, acknowledging the answer as correct. A concealed door swung open, uncovering the clandestine chamber where they conducted his sacrificial rituals. He found himself curious about the identities and origins of the individuals within. As he entered the room, those inside were caught off guard, their expressions shifting rapidly to ones of astonishment and trepidation. Pondered over his options regarding the group, eventually deciding that the best course of action was to head back to the territory for the time being. He is confident that after he provides an explanation of the situation, they will likely dispatch someone to handle it. As he made his way back to the mercenary guild, Rosa noticed his early return and greeted him warmly. Acknowledges that an unexpected issue has arisen. He mentioned to her that their conversation concerned the gemstone he had revealed to her the previous day. Rosa believed he was merely jesting about discovering firmly declared that he was being completely serious. Rosa remained doubtful, questioning the unusual presence of one of the mere 5 known to exist in such an isolated location. In an effort to convince her, offered her a ceramic pot as evidence. He expressed his belief that it was the Slife vessel and requested her to evaluate it. Rosa felt a jolt of surprise wash over her as she came to the realization that he had been completely serious. Mentioned that there had been several individuals within the Slayer. He reflected on his initial intention to bring them along, but realizing their souls had already moved on, he decided to leave them behind for the moment. He held on to the hope that the guild would eventually send someone to deal with the matter. Rosa began piecing together the clues as memories of the recent spate of disappearances in the area surfaced in her mind, leading her to the conclusion that these individuals were probably the unfortunate targets of the. Upon feeling a surge of panic, she decided to contact someone right away. Not long after, the captain of the guard appeared, loudly demanding information about the. Meanwhile, welcomed him with a cool demeanor. Assured the captain that all matters had been handled, and it was nothing significant. As the captain inquired about the identity of the, and introduced the name cases into the conversation, acknowledged that the name did indeed ring a bell. The captain instantly understood the significance of the name. The narrative detailed how a sorcerer had wreaked havoc a century ago by appending the world with his magic, which manipulated emotions and caused widespread turmoil. He mentioned that he had driven monarchs to madness and caused the downfall of 5 kingdoms. Conveyed that they had not been very remarkable and had ultimately caused his own downfall through bizarre actions. The captain struggled to comprehend how someone as legendary as the sorcerer could have caused his own destruction and turned to, seeking a more detailed explanation. Mentioned that he had little to contribute to the conversation. The captain concluded that it was imperative for him to promptly inform the Lord. Later on, the Lord and the captain engaged in a conversation about the current situation. The Lord conveyed his bewilderment regarding the presence of a so close to their territory. He speculated whether it might have been a different kind of creature entirely. The captain dismissed that possibility, relying on the statements given by the survivors and the discovery of the life vessel as proof. The Lord pondered the grave implications of keeping this life vessel so close to the territory. The situation was perilous enough that the Empire was likely to dispatch investigators, and this concern was exacerbated by the absence of Cain from the region. The entire situation seemed to him to be a significant nuisance. He instructs a messenger to be made ready for dispatch to the kingdom, yet senses that they have a stroke of luck on their side. The captain of the guards acknowledged the situation, reflecting that their territory would have been the initial target if not for the barbarian uncovering the. The Lord concluded that the had probably been making arrangements for his own revival. He determined that the circumstances were far from ordinary. The Lord expressed that a deed of such magnitude warranted a reward of significant value. He questioned whether his domain could provide an appropriate reward. The following morning, a frantic servant roused the Lord from his slumber. The servant delivered news to him about the arrival of Lady Aquas, known as the heretic inquisitor of the sun god, which left the Lord in a state of shock. He found himself puzzled, questioning the reason behind her unexpected arrival. In the realm of all her majesty, the notorious inquisitor known for heretical actions made an appearance. The Lord greeted her with a touch of nervousness, offering his introduction as he did so. She expressed her gratitude to him for his warm hospitality. The woman announced her name as Aquas, identifying herself as the heretic inquisitor devoted to the sun god. The story unfolds with the revelation that she holds the distinction of being the youngest person ever to achieve this prestigious title. It is further recounted that she managed to eliminate 7 sorcerers and single-handedly brought an end to a massive ritual. On the continent, she stood as the most formidable heretic inquisitor, commanding a level of authority that exceeded even that of Lord. In her presence, the empire itself yielded to the decrees of the sun god. The Lord found himself pondering once more about why she was there. Aqua had observed that the region had been quite tumultuous lately. The Lord detailed that a small issue had arisen in a dungeon, but was already taken care of, assuring that her presence was unrelated to any matters concerning the. Upon his inquiry about the purpose of her visit, she explained that she was there to discuss the prophecy. Before revealing the specifics of the prophecy, she expressed her desire to verify the events that occurred within the territory. The Lord, with a hint of worry in his voice, inquired if she was referring to the Barbarian and the. She acknowledged the statement and mentioned that the was likely identified as. The Lord was taken aback by her knowledge, while Aquas informed him that the proof had arrived. He offered her the life vessel belonging to the. Upon laying eyes on the life vessel, Aqua's expression revealed a profound shock. She inquires about whether the warrior from the wild lands remains within the region. The Lord affirms his continued presence in that place. Pondered the possibility that the Barbarian had managed to defeat. The Lord acknowledged that such an outcome was indeed within the realm of possibility. He concluded with the startling revelation that he had personally vanquished Lord Cain, leaving Aquas utterly stunned. Aquas realized that a formidable new presence had emerged, and inquired about the tribe to which this barbarian belonged. Lord mentioned his claim of originating from the white snowfield, leaving Aquas in disbelief. She pondered the possibility of something from the demon realm manifesting in the outside world. The thought crossed her mind that this barbarian could be the very reason for her arrival in this place. She expressed her desire for a face-to-face meeting with the barbarian. At the same time, found himself pondering over the staff. He suspected it was an instrument crafted to aid in the use of magic. Determined to uncover its secrets, he resolved to consult with the mages about it at a later time. He suddenly becomes aware that the moment has arrived for an important task. The captain of the guards arrived with news, reporting that the Inquisitor, known for his heretical views on the sun god, had requested an audience with him at the church. The captain requested that he demonstrate appropriate respect, to which responded with a promise of reassurance. Encountered the captain outside the church. The individual appeared anxious, as declared that the group would begin their journey. Pondered the presence of deities in this realm, contemplating how they occasionally granted their power directly or chose to descend themselves. He believes that the church serves as a meeting place for individuals devoted to the deities. Found herself captivated by the stunning beauty of the sun god's church. The captain informed him that a guide would escort him inside and expressed gratitude. Stepped through the grand entrance of the magnificent church. Upon arrival, 3 priestesses adorned in white garments welcomed her. One individual informs him that Lady Aquas has been eagerly anticipating his arrival and offers to guide him to the designated room. Encounters, who is known as the Inquisitor of the Sun God and has a reputation for heresy. The man identified himself as the Barbarian, conveying his delight in making her acquaintance. Aquas caught sight of his smile and found herself pondering its significance. Meanwhile, reflected on the situation, concluding that the person must possess considerable skill. Inquires about the cause for his summoning. Aqua detailed the recent events in the dungeon, focusing on the who claimed to have vanquished. The speaker explained that had perpetrated numerous atrocities on a global scale. After transforming into he became unstoppable, with only a hero capable of halting his reign of terror. Acknowledged that he had heard the news, but he was adamant that the he encountered was merely a set to self-destruct. He explains to her that his only ability is to describe what he witnessed. Aqua proposes that she permits the sun god, whom she is devoted to witness their discussion. In her explanation, she mentions that lying in the presence of the deity will provoke a negative reaction, leading to realize that this serves as a divine lie detector. Aquas anticipated that, known for his barbaric nature, would reject the offer outright. Found himself puzzled by the refusal, for he saw it as a unique chance to witness a god's power firsthand. Filled with eagerness, he readily accepted the offer to begin right away. Felt a rush of astonishment as he pondered the reason behind the apparent excitement. ACQAS inquired whether the proposal was a source of discomfort for CATAL. Questioned her intentions, seeking clarification. She explained that her reference was to the god's constant watch over him. Pondering this, mused on why such surveillance would be concerning, confidently asserting that he had nothing to conceal, having spoken nothing but the truth. Aquas nodded in agreement and started to offer a prayer. The girl reached out to her deity, who gazed down from the heavens, witnessing the brilliance of the sun in its full splendor. The purpose was to uncover any remaining deceptions. An intense and radiant glow envelops the entire area. Sensed a powerful force that was beyond the ability of words to fully capture. He becomes aware that this presence holds a curiosity about him. Aqua felt a wave of relief wash over them as there were no adverse responses. They proceeded to initiate the ritual. Within the radiant pillar of light, she announced that henceforth, all forms of deceit were strictly prohibited. Acknowledged that he understood,